If you are currently preparing for the IELTS and have no idea what to expect on test day, please continue watching this video. It's a comprehensive study guide that contains all the information you need to pass the test with flying colors. We'll cover the structure of the test, delve into high-scoring tips and tricks for each section, learn must-know linking words for the speaking and the essential academic words you should know to succeed on the reading and listening. But most importantly, we'll do a full reading section, a full listening section, and a full speaking section together, giving you an ideal opportunity to practice the test right away and finish with the final test day tips. By the end of this video, I hope you'll see that the IELTS test is not as scary and intimidating as it may seem, and you'll be armed with all the information you need. If your IELTS test is coming up and you want to get feedback on your essays and speaking responses, click on the link below to sign up for our IELTS course and schedule a consultation with me. I'll tell you how well you'll score on the writing and speaking if you take the test tomorrow and what you should do differently to get a better score. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to get more tips and tricks about the test and click the bell icon to be notified when the next video comes out. Let's get started. The IELTS test has been around for quite a while, and there are tons of prep resources and strategies available online. However, many students still fail to get the score they need on their first attempt. Why is that? First, many aren't familiar enough with the structure of the exam. They don't know what to expect on the day of the test and can't anticipate the traps the IELTS creators have prepared for them. The second problem is not knowing exactly what to do to get a high score. As part of our IELTS prep course, I evaluate students' speaking and writing responses. And what I can see is that many of them waste a lot of time not doing the right thing. Just to give you an example, if you stuff your speaking responses with too many academic and fancy words that you don't understand, you will never get a high score. Instead, it will lower your score. So very often, the people who come to my consultations are those who have a good level of English and can score high, but just don't know how to do it. Finally, your level of English is also important. For example, I often see students with an intermediate level trying to get a band 8 in 2 weeks of preparation. Unfortunately, that's highly unlikely, even though you can improve your score significantly by implementing various tips and strategies. You can't quickly attain a band 7, 8, or 9 if your level is poor. We've prepared a free PDF file with advanced vocabulary for speaking and writing. In fact, these words will help you improve your score in every section. You can find the link to the PDF in the description below. So, what should you do to get your dream score on the IELTS test? Hello and welcome to our IELTS preparation guide. My name is Anastasia. I got a band 9 on the IELTS test and have been helping students prepare for this exam for over 10 years. In this video, I'll walk you through the key points to help you excel on the IELTS exam and achieve the score you need. The first thing you need to do is decide which type of the IELTS test you want to take. There are two main types of IELTS: IELTS General Training and IELTS Academic. If you're not sure about the difference between the two, IELTS Academic is for people who want to study in an English-speaking country, while IELTS General Training is for those who want to live and work abroad. Simply put, IELTS Academic tests your ability to study in English, and IELTS General Training tests how well you can use English in everyday situations. Second, to score well in both the IELTS General and IELTS Academic tests, you need to be familiar with their structure. Both tests consist of 4 sections: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. The listening and speaking tests are the same for both IELTS Academic and IELTS General Training, but the reading and writing tests are slightly different. Let's take a quick look at what to expect on both tests. The listening section is the first section of the test. Again, it's the same for both IELTS General and IELTS Academic. It consists of 4 recorded monologues and conversations with 10 questions after each monologue or conversation. It usually takes 30 to 40 minutes. A very important note: You will only listen to the tape once, so you need to be very good at multitasking and answering the questions as you listen. Next comes the reading section, which is slightly different for the IELTS General and IELTS Academic tests. For both tests, this section lasts 60 minutes and consists of 3 parts, each more difficult than the one before. There are 40 questions in total, and the types of questions are the same for both tests. However, the main difference between the 2 tests is the number and length of the passages you have to read, as well as their topics. While the IELTS Academic has more challenging academic passages, the IELTS General Training has passages and topics related to everyday life and work. In the writing section, there are 2 essays for IELTS Academic and 1 essay and 1 letter for IELTS General. These are known as Task 1 and Task 2. Task 1 can be a letter or an analysis of a diagram, while Task 2 is a typical essay and is the same for both types of the test. Finally, the IELTS speaking section is divided into 3 parts. In Part 1, you will be asked questions on 2 different topics related to your life. In Part 2, you'll have 1 to 2 minutes to speak on a given topic. Part 3 lasts 4 to 5 minutes and includes more questions related to the main topic of Part 2. You'll have to give longer answers, often up to 1 minute or more, with many details. Now that you know about the 2 types of exams available and how they're structured, your next step is to carefully study all the question types you'll encounter in each section and strategies for approaching them effectively. This is a crucial step. Even native speakers struggle with the test if they don't have a good understanding of the question types. Unfortunately, we don't have time to cover the question types in this video because there are many of them and each has its own strategy. Instead, I'll focus on the most important tips to help you succeed in the IELTS test. However, if your exam is approaching and you need more guidance, enroll in our IELTS prep course and learn everything you need to know about the test. You'll find all the information you require presented in a clear, understandable, and concise way. If you're interested in having your speaking and writing skills evaluated, choose the Pro package. The promo code link is in the description below. And of course, don't forget to practice. Consistent and focused practice is the key to IELTS success. Take full-length practice tests under exam conditions to simulate the real test environment. Be sure to choose your practice materials carefully and use official resources. Why do you need this? Because by practicing regularly, you'll not only get used to the structure of the test, but you'll also learn to apply all the strategies and tips effectively, and maybe even adapt some of them to suit you better. It's important to understand that even some of the most effective strategies that work for many students may not work for you. And the only way to find out is to take regular practice tests, apply different strategies, and see how your test score changes. Now, it's time for the tips and tricks. Tip 1. Choose the prep materials that suit your situation. If you plan to take a paper-based test, use authentic practice tests from Cambridge English Language Assessment. If you're taking a computer-based test, try the sample computer tests on IELTS.org before your exam. This way, you'll get used to the interface and won't make mistakes just because you're too stressed out. Tip 2. When practicing at home, always give yourself less time than IELTS allows. This will help you develop good time management skills. For example, instead of setting the timer for 60 minutes for the writing section, set it for 50 minutes. You'll never run out of time on test day if you practice this way. Tip 3. Learn to spell words. This is especially important for the listening section, but it will also be very helpful for the reading and writing section. Most of my students, even those whose listening skills are excellent, often lose points on the IELTS listening section simply because they misspell words. For example, they might write L-I-E-S-U-R-E instead of L-E-I-S-U-R-E, or P-E-R-S-O-N-E-L instead of P-E-R-S-O-N-N-E-L. Unfortunately, IELTS doesn't give points for such answers, even if the answer itself is correct. Don't make the same mistake and prepare in advance. Look for a list of commonly misspelled words on the internet. For example, type 100 most commonly misspelled words PDF into the search engine. Translate the words from the list into your native language. And then check that you know how to spell them correctly. None of my students have ever done this exercise without finding at least a few words they don't know how to spell. Tip 4. Work on reading strategies. As you may have guessed, this is relevant to tackling the IELTS reading section. So, in addition to learning the question types and strategies for them, you should study and then work on reading strategies. The two most common ones are skimming and scanning. In simple words, skimming means looking quickly at the text to get a general idea of what it's about. For example, you might skim the synopsis of a movie to decide whether or not you want to see it. Now, scanning is about searching text for specific information or keywords. You don't read everything. Instead, you look for keywords, phrases, or numbers that match what you're looking for. Mastering these strategies will help you find the right answers faster and ensure you stay within the time limit. Tip 5. Study the assessment criteria for the speaking and writing sections. To find them, simply type IELTS Combined Assessment Criteria PDF into the search engine. The first result you'll get is a PDF file with tables explaining the assessment criteria. There are 4 assessment criteria for the speaking section: fluency and coherence, lexical resource, grammatical range and accuracy, and pronunciation. There are also 4 assessment criteria for the writing section: task achievement, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, and grammatical range and accuracy. Why is this important? It's because you need to understand what the examiner is looking for in your answer in order to get a high score. For example, does frequent repetition matter in your speaking response? Does punctuation matter in your writing response? The scoring criteria answer all of these questions. Tip 6 is about speaking. You see, to speak fluently and coherently on a variety of topics, you need to learn to connect your ideas smoothly and avoid hesitations and pauses. One of the ways to do this is to add logical connectors to your speech. These include conjunctions, prepositions, and transitions. To practice, make a list of them. For example, even though, while, as a result, unless, as soon as, consequently, and then think of ways to incorporate them into your speech. Do this every time you practice the speaking part. Record yourself and make sure these words sound natural, not forced. With practice, they'll become an integral part of your speech. Tip 7. Use complex, compound, and complex compound sentences in the writing section. Learning to do this is a game changer. It will increase your score for grammatical range and accuracy, which makes up 25% of your writing score. And it'll help you avoid punctuation mistakes. Achieving a high score on the IELTS exam is not an impossible feat. With dedication, perseverance, and strategic preparation, you can accomplish your goal. Keep practicing, stay focused, and believe in yourself. Also, seek feedback. Ask a teacher, tutor, or language partner for feedback on your speaking and writing. They can provide valuable insights and suggestions for improvement. You can also join our course and choose the Pro package to schedule a consultation with me. During the consultation, I will evaluate your speaking and writing performance and tell you what you need to do to get a high score. I need to score a 9 on the IELTS listening section in a few days, and I have no idea where to start. No matter how many practice tests I've done, my score always stays the same. I don't understand how to listen to the recordings and answer questions at the same time. Most of my mistakes are spelling mistakes. How am I supposed to remember how to spell all these words? Okay, these are just a few of the typical problems IELTS students have when it comes to IELTS listening. Having taught IELTS for over 10 years, I've seen many different types of students. Some of them were intermediate learners. Some had lived in Canada and the US for over 20 years. And some were English teachers who wanted to get their degrees abroad. Of course, they all had different problems, but most struggled with correctly spelling answers, keeping up with the recording, multitasking, staying focused under pressure, and staying on time. So, I decided to dedicate this video to all future IELTS test takers who want to score high on the listening section of the IELTS test. By the end of this video, I hope you'll understand that the IELTS listening is not as scary as it seems and will feel equipped with all the necessary tools and knowledge to tackle it effectively. So, welcome to our comprehensive guide to excelling in the IELTS listening section. It's important to realize that your IELTS listening score, just like the score you get for any other section of a language test, depends largely on your level. If you're an intermediate student, your preparation plan will be very different from that of an advanced English learner. You'll need to work on refining your listening skills and expanding your vocabulary. So, the first thing you want to do is determine your listening level. As I said, this is an important step in creating your IELTS listening study plan. To do this, take 2 or 3 listening practice tests from IELTS.org, British Council, or Cambridge Prep Books, and calculate your average score. There are 40 questions in the IELTS listening section. If you get 35 to 36 or higher, your listening skills are very good, and you should focus on the structure of the test, study the different types of questions, maybe brush up on your spelling, and of course, practice with the IELTS listening tests. If you answer 30 to 31 questions correctly, your band score will be 7, and you'll be considered a good user of the language. This means that you can still work on the IELTS listening, but you should also improve your listening skills at the same time. I'll show you some things you can do later in this video. If you get about 23 to 25 questions right, you're a competent user, which means you should focus on improving your level first and then approach the IELTS test. Of course, it also depends on the score you're aiming for. If your target score is 6.5, you don't need to study as much as someone who wants to get a 9. We'll talk about your next steps in a few seconds. But first, I want to share with you a project that I'm personally very proud of, our new IELTS test guide. When I was planning the content, I was thinking about what to include in this guide, because there is so much free information out there these days, and yet hundreds of students are still not getting the results they want. So I decided that instead of just giving you a lot of theoretical information about the test, I'd create small tasks, exercises, and tests that will really help you improve your skills. And this, by the way, is what you must do for your IELTS preparation. Studying information is important, of course, but you also want to practice and apply all that knowledge. So, I've organized the theoretical information into tables, graphs, and spreadsheets to make it easy for you to understand. That way, you won't have to search all the official websites to find answers to your questions. Then, I created lots of fun and practical activities to help you actually work on the skills we cover. For example, in the spelling block for the listening section, you'll be asked to change the forms of words, study words with similar spellings, fill in the blanks, and more. Finally, to make sure you really remember all the information you learn, I added fun tests at the end of each chapter. So, I'm very proud of the end result, as I think it's one of the most effective prep books out there. And I'm sure that having such a guide will be of great help to those who want to prepare for the test in a short, effective, and fun way. Personally, I wish I had a similar study guide when I was preparing for the test, because it would have made my life so much easier. I'll leave the link to the guide in the description. Feel free to check it out. Now that you've figured out what your level is, it's time for the next 2 steps. Study the structure of the listening section and its question types. The IELTS listening section is the same for the academic and general training tests, so you can use the test from both versions to practice. The section is only 30 minutes long and consists of 4 parts. And as you already know, there are 40 questions in total. Each part is a recording. They are usually given in this order: a conversation, a monologue, another conversation, and another monologue. For example, you might first hear a phone conversation between a job seeker and the Human Resources Department. Then, a tour guide talking about the museum. Then a teacher and 2 students discussing origami as a learning tool. And finally, a lecture on the French writer Victor Hugo. Some important facts to remember about IELTS listening. You listen to each recording only once. Questions always come in order. So you'll hear the answer to the first question at the beginning of the recording, and the answer to the last question at the end of the recording. You can take the test on a computer or on paper. For the IELTS computer test, there is no extra time to type in your answers. If you're taking the IELTS paper-based test, you will have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet at the end of the section. Use this time wisely to carefully transfer your answers and check your spelling. Remember, this is the moment to make sure there aren't any spelling mistakes, as they will cost you points, even if your answer is correct. The typical questions you'll find in this section are multiple choice, matching, planned map diagram labeling, form note table flowchart summary or sentence completion, and short answer questions. Study the strategy for each of these questions carefully, as it will help you feel more confident on test day. Again, while knowing the strategy for each question is really important, you should also remember that if your listening skills and vocabulary are not up to par, no amount of strategies and tips will help you. So let's move on to step 3. Improve your listening skills and vocabulary. There are a few simple things you can do to improve your listening skills and expand your vocabulary. First, listen to audiobooks or podcasts non-stop. Don't set aside a specific time for this practice. Just get into the habit of listening to something in English whenever your brain isn't busy. So, when you're stuck in traffic, doing chores, walking the dog, or just working out at the gym, turn on an audiobook or a podcast that you enjoy and just listen. In our video about the speaking part of IELTS, I talked about the importance of exposing yourself to quality English. And the same applies to the listening part. If you don't know where to start, check out Ali Abdaal's Deep Dive podcast or listen to Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs. Number 2, practice dictation. Dictation practice involves listening to spoken sentences or passages and writing down what you hear. This practice improves listening accuracy, concentration, and understanding of sentence structure and grammar. A great resource for dictation practice is the Daily Dictation website. They offer dictation exercises on a variety of topics and levels, including IELTS listening. For those at a high intermediate level, I suggest practicing with the IELTS listening dictation exercises. For those who have a low intermediate level and below, start with short stories, daily conversations, or TOEIC listening, and gradually build up your listening skills before moving on to IELTS listening. This will also greatly improve your vocabulary and spelling. This brings us to number 4. Improve your spelling. On the IELTS listening section, you'll have many questions where you have to write down answers. And if you make even one spelling mistake, your answer will be considered incorrect. About 50% of the students I see in my one-on-one sessions lose points not because they can't understand the recording or catch the right answer, but because they can't spell it correctly. One of the most common problems is the spelling of names and surnames. The Daily Dictation website has a special section dedicated to spelling, so feel free to check it out. Also, I always recommend using the Fast Fingers website. It's a cool website that will help you improve your typing skills, which will definitely come in handy if you're taking a computer-based test. But it also allows you to improve your spelling. Start with the top 200 words and spend about 5 minutes a day typing. Then move on to the top 1,000 words. Finally, check out the custom typing feature where you can choose any text you like and type it. Tip number 5 is to improve your understanding of academic topics and campus vocabulary. IELTS covers a wide variety of subjects, including science, art, history, social sciences, and campus vocabulary. Unless you attended a high school or a college where all classes were taught in English, you may find most of these subjects quite challenging, especially biology or geography lectures. Identify your problem areas and watch videos on YouTube specifically for these subjects. You can use the Crash Course YouTube channel. I especially like it because it has playlists with multiple videos dedicated to the most common school subjects. Also, the teachers in the video speak fast, so it's another great way to brush up on your listening skills. Watch subtitled videos first to get used to hearing difficult words. Also, write down 5 new words for each video. You can also use the Ology website. It's a very friendly website created by the American Museum of Natural History for kids that gives you lots of fun articles and games for each topic. You can study marine biology, archaeology, physics, and so on, explained to you in a super engaging and simple way. Again, as you read or play the games, write down all the words you don't know and then use those words to summarize the information you've learned. In my one-on-one sessions, I always make Quizlet sets with topic-specific vocabulary for my students and create tests with these words to make sure they are exposed to the new vocabulary as much as possible. You can come up with sample sentences using the new words to help you retain them. Campus vocabulary is necessary for conversations related to college life. You can find many lists on vocabulary.com. If you don't know words like major, prerequisites, counselor, assessment, eligible, you should definitely study campus vocabulary. Track your progress. Be sure to write down all your test scores to see if you're improving or not. Not only will this motivate you to try harder, it will also help you calculate your average score right before you take the test. Also, write down new vocabulary and keep it in one place. This can be a real notebook or notes on your phone. Seeing how many new words you've already learned is extremely rewarding. And keeping them in one place makes reviewing them much more convenient. 7. Identify keywords and think of possible paraphrases and synonyms. You'll always have some time to review the questions before the recording begins. During this time, focus on identifying keywords that will help you find the right answer as you listen. Pay attention to details, such as times, places, and names. For example, if the question is about what happened in 1989, you will need to listen carefully for that date. Also, be prepared for synonyms, paraphrases, and restatements. The question may ask about the student's grades in school, but in the recording, you'll hear that he or she was an A student or graduated with honors. This information does not have the same keywords, but it provides the answer to our question. 8. Predict answers. For multiple choice questions, you may want to try predicting possible answers. This will help you listen more actively and also allow you to catch the right answer. 9. Maintain calm and focus. While this may seem like a basic tip, I see hundreds of students who panic when they miss an answer. So stay calm and focused throughout the test. If you miss a question, stay calm and concentrate on answering the next questions correctly. If you panic, you'll lose your concentration and score much lower. Confidence and composure are essential for success. So approach the test like a robot, mechanically and calmly. 10. Practice with authentic materials. As I mentioned earlier, it's important to practice with realistic materials that closely resemble the actual test. Use sample tests and recordings from reputable sources to simulate test conditions and build confidence. These include IELTS.org, Cambridge Prep Books, and the British Council website. 11. Analyze listening transcripts. To ace the IELTS listening, you need to understand the structure of conversations and lectures. Take the time to analyze the transcript of each practice test you take. You can use the Daily Dictation website to help you do this. This is especially true for lectures, which are usually more difficult to follow. Pay attention to how the ideas in the lecture are connected. Think of yourself as the professor giving the lecture. How would you organize it? What would come first? What would come second? How would you explain a difficult concept to someone who does not understand? Pay special attention to transitional and signal words by analyzing their function in the text. I have no clue how to get a high score on the IELTS listening. Every time I do a practice test, I get a completely different score. One time, I get a 7.5, but another, I get a 6. If you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. These comments are something I hear often from my IELTS students when it comes to the IELTS listening. Today, it's time to answer them by doing a full IELTS listening section. This will help you test your listening skills and see how well you'd score if you took the test tomorrow. If you want to learn the templates that make up almost half of your answer and allow you to score high on the speaking and writing sections, click on the link down below. Now, get your pens and pencils ready and let's begin. The test we'll be doing is from Cambridge Prep Book 18. You can find the link to it below. As we go along, We'll listen to the recordings and answer the questions at the same time. After each recording, we'll stop to discuss the answers. This way, you won't have to wait until the end of the section to analyze your mistakes. I'll also share tips and tricks about the section and point out some important details. A few things to remember before we begin. Although the IELTS listening section has never been considered extremely difficult, it is the section where students usually can't get consistent results. This is usually because of a couple of reasons: poor listening skills, inability to multitask, limited vocabulary, and poor spelling skills. I always monitor the results of my students and the reasons they make mistakes, and what I can tell you is that the inability to multitask and poor spelling skills are the main problems. In most cases, students understand conversations and lectures quite well, unless they have an intermediate level of English. But the problem is that they either can't switch back and forth between the recording and the questions quickly enough, or they make spelling mistakes in the answers. The interesting thing is that these are often people with very good language skills. So, as you can see, success on the IELTS listening section is not just about your level. It's important to know how to approach this section in the most effective way. So, let's begin our section by listening to the instructions.
Test 3. This is the IELTS listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1. Part 1. You will hear a man talking to the coordinator of a photography club. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4.
The first question is the form completion question. You'll need to complete the form in front of you. As you can see, they give you time to review the questions before listening to the recording. Use this time to quickly scan the task so that you know what to expect in the conversation. Pay attention to how many words and/or numbers you can write and what kind of answers you need to look for. For example, in question 1, you need to write the name of the street. They will probably spell it out letter by letter. Question 2 asks how the speaker heard about the club. Question 3 is about the second reason why the speaker wants to join the club. And question 4 is about the type of membership that costs £30. As always, expect to hear paraphrases and synonyms in the recording. So don't just listen for the words, listen for ideas. Let's begin listening.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hello, Wayside Camera Club, Breeder speaking.
Oh, hello. My name's Dan, and I'd like to join your club.
That's great, Dan. We have an application form. Would you like to complete it over the phone? Then you can ask any questions you might have.
Oh, yes, thanks.
Okay. So, what's your family name?
It's Green. Dan Green.
So, can I take your email address?
Yes, it's dan1068@market.com.
Thanks. And what about your home address?
Well, I'm about 10 miles away from your club in Peacetown. I live in a house there.
Okay. So what's the house number and street?
It's 52 Marrowfield Street.
Is that MARROWFIELD?
That's right.
And that's Peacetown, you said?
Uh-huh.
So how did you hear about our club? Did you look on the internet?
I usually do that, but this time, well, I was talking to a relative the other day and he suggested it.
Oh, is he a member too?
He belongs to another club, but he'd heard good things about yours.
Okay. So what do you hope to get from joining?
Well, one thing that really interests me is the competitions that you have. I enjoy entering those.
Right. Anything else?
Well, I also like to socialize with other photographers.
That's great. So what type of membership would you like?
What are the options?
It's £30 a year for full membership, or £20 a year if you're an associate.
I think I'll go for the full membership then.
That's a good idea, because you can't vote in meetings with an associate membership.
The information in the recording goes in the same order as in the form, which makes answering the questions much easier. The correct answers are 1. Marrowfield. As I predicted, they spelled it. 2. Relative. 3. Socialize. Both versions of the spelling are accepted. 4. Full. As you can see, there are two types of spelling aspects that you should expect to be tested on. One is simply knowing how to spell the word you heard. This is where the Fast Fingers website comes in handy. This exercise will also hone your typing skills. You can also practice on the spelling training website, where you can choose lists or import your own lists of words you'd like to remember how to spell. The second aspect is to be able to write down the name of the street, the city, or the person's last name that is given to you letter by letter. This is what most students struggle with. You can practice on the Daily Dictation website, which has a spelling section. Finally, you can also review groups of words that are often misspelled. Let's move on. Questions 5 to 10. This task is a table completion question. You'll need to complete the table and use no more than 2 words.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
If I could just find out a bit more about you.
Okay.
So, you said you wanted to compete. Have you ever won any photography competitions?
Not yet, but I have entered 3 in the past.
Oh, that's interesting. So why don't you tell me something about those? Let's start with the first one.
Well, the theme was entitled Domestic Life.
I see. So it had to be something related to the home?
Yeah. I chose to take a photo of a family sitting round the dinner table having a meal. And, I didn't win, but I did get some feedback.
Oh, what did the judges say?
That it was too busy as a picture.
Aha. So it was the composition of the picture that they criticised?
That's right. And once they'd told me that, I could see my mistake.
So what was the theme of the second competition?
Well, my university was on the coast, and that area gets a lot of beautiful sunsets. So that was the theme.
Oh, sunsets. That's a great theme.
Yes, the instructions were to capture the clouds as well. It couldn't just be blue sky and a setting sun.
Sure, because they give you all those amazing pinks and purples.
Yeah, and I thought I'd done that well, but the feedback was that I should have waited a bit longer to get the shot.
I see. So the timing wasn't right.
Yes, I took it too soon, basically. And then the third competition I entered was called Animal Magic.
Well, that's a difficult subject.
I know. I had to take hundreds of shots.
I'm sure, because animals move all the time.
That's what we had to show. There had to be some movement in the scene. I got a great shot of a fox in the end, but I took it at night and, well, I suspected that it was a bit dark, which is what I was told.
Well, Dan, you seem to be really keen, and we'd be delighted to have you in our club. I'm sure we can help with all those areas that you've outlined.
Thanks, that's great.
Let's check your work. 5. Domestic life. 6. Clouds. 7. Timing. In the conversation, the woman said that the timing wasn't right, which means it was wrong. 8. Animal magic. 9. Animal movement, or just movement, but not movements. 10. Dark. Again, this task is pretty straightforward. What you want to do here is make sure you don't get distracted by all the extra information you hear. In the beginning, you don't have to write down much, because they give you time to understand the conversation. Then, as you get closer to the end, you'll have more answers to give. As you can see, part 1 is usually fairly easy. 2 things to keep in mind are staying focused, even if the conversation seems very basic, and brushing up on your spelling skills. Let's move on to part 2. In this section, you'll have to choose 2 letters to answer each question. There are some similar choices for each question. Make sure you read them carefully and find the differences between them. It's also a good idea to predict the correct answers by using your logic. This will help you to better analyze the answer options.
Part 2. You will hear an expert on picking wild mushrooms called Dan talking on the radio. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
This evening, we're delighted to welcome Dan Beagle, who's just written a book on looking for and finding food in the wild. He's going to tell us everything we need to know about picking wild mushrooms.
Thank you very much. Well, I need to start by talking about safety. You really need to know what you're doing because some mushrooms are extremely poisonous. Having said that, once you know what to look for, it's really worth doing for the amazing variety of mushrooms available, which you can't get in the shops. But of course, you have to be very careful, and that's why I always say you should never consume mushrooms picked by friends or neighbours. Always remember that some poisonous mushrooms look very similar to edible ones, and it's easy for people to get confused. The other thing to avoid is mushrooms growing beside busy roads, for obvious reasons. But nothing beats the taste of freshly picked mushrooms. Don't forget that the ones in the shops are often several days old and past their best. There are certain ideas about wild mushrooms that it's important to be aware of. Don't listen to people who tell you that it's only okay to eat mushrooms that are pale or dull. This is completely untrue. Some edible mushrooms are bright red, for example. Personally, I prefer mushrooms cooked, but it won't do you any harm to eat them uncooked in salads. It's not necessary to peel them. Another thing you should remember is that you can't tell if a mushroom is safe to eat by its smell. Some of the most deadly mushrooms have no smell and taste quite nice, apparently. Finally, just because deer or squirrels eat a particular mushroom doesn't mean that you can.
Let's check your answers. 11 to 12, B, C. 13 to 14, B, D. The first part of the recording addresses the first question, while the second part covers the second question. Now, the options given are presented randomly to make it more difficult to find the right ones. For example, in question 2, the speaker first mentions option D and then option B. Again, be prepared for paraphrases and synonyms in the recording, so listen for ideas, not just keywords. Questions 15 to 20. A notorious multiple choice question. Be sure to read the questions first, and then, if you have time, analyze the answer options. In each question, analyze keywords that will help you locate the right part of the recording.
Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
Of course, mushroom picking is associated with the countryside, but if you haven't got a car, your local park can be a great place to start. There are usually a range of habitats where mushrooms grow, such as playing fields and wooded areas. But you need to be there first thing in the morning, as there's likely to be a lot of competition. Not just from people, but wildlife too. The deer often get the best mushrooms in my local park. If you're a complete beginner, I wouldn't recommend going alone or relying on photos in a book, even the one I've written. There are some really good phone apps for identifying mushrooms, but you can't always rely on getting a good signal in the middle of a wood. If possible, you should go with a group led by an expert. You'll stay safe and learn a lot that way. Conservation is a really important consideration, and you must follow a few basic rules. You should never pick all the mushrooms in one area. Collect only enough for your own needs. Be very careful that you don't trample on young mushrooms or other plants. And make sure you don't pick any mushrooms that are endangered and protected by law. There's been a decline in some varieties of wild mushrooms in this part of the country. Restaurants are becoming more interested in locally sourced food like wild mushrooms, but the biggest problem is that so many new houses have been built in this area in the last 10 years. And more water is being taken from rivers and reservoirs because of this, and mushroom habitats have been destroyed. Anyway, a word of advice on storing mushrooms. Collect them in a brown paper bag, and as soon as you get home, put them in the fridge. They'll be fine for a couple of days, but it's best to cook them as soon as possible. After washing them really carefully first, of course. So, everybody knows what a mushroom tastes like, right? Well, you'll be surprised by the huge variety of wild mushrooms there are. Be adventurous. They're great in so many dishes. Stir-fries, risottos, pasta. But just be aware that some people can react badly to certain varieties, so it's a good idea not to eat huge quantities to begin with. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a few examples of poison.
That is the end of part 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 2.
(15) C. The keyword in this sentence is park. 16. B. The keyword is beginners. Also be careful, as the IELTS creators like to set traps. For example, for this question, the speaker first said that using a mushroom app might be a good idea. But then he started talking about its disadvantages. So, don't be tempted to choose the first option you hear. 17, B. The keyword is conservation. 18, C. The keyword is decline. 19, A. 20, A. This section is a bit harder than the previous one, as the question types and the topics of the recording are more complex. Let's move on to part 3. It starts with 2 more questions that you need to choose answers for. Let's listen to the recording.
Part 3. You will hear 2 business students discussing automation and the future of work. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
That seminar yesterday on automation and the future of work was really good, wasn't it? Looking at the first industrial revolution in Britain in the 19th century and seeing how people reacted to massive change was a real eye-opener.
Yes. It was interesting to hear how people felt about automation then and what challenges they faced. I didn't know that first started with workers in the textile industry.
With those protesting workers called the Luddites, destroying their knitting machines because they were so worried about losing their jobs.
Yes, and ultimately they didn't achieve anything. And anyway, industrialization created more jobs than it destroyed.
Yes, that's true. But it probably didn't seem a positive thing at the time. I can see why the Luddites felt so threatened.
I know. I'm sure I would have felt the same. The discussion about the future of work was really optimistic for a change. I like the idea that work won't involve doing boring, repetitive tasks, as robots will do all that. Normally, you only hear negative stuff about the future.
Bit too optimistic, don't you think? For example, I can't see how people are about to have more leisure time when all the evidence shows people are spending longer than ever at work.
No, that's true. And what about lower unemployment? I'm not so sure about that.
Perhaps in the long term, but not in the foreseeable future.
And I expect most people will be expected to work until they're much older, as everyone's living much longer.
That's already happening.
(21-22) A, E. 23-24 B, D. The keywords to listen for are Luddites and the future of work. As soon as you hear them, you know what question you should be answering. If you didn't have time to analyze all the answer options in the time given, you can always look through them after the talk and choose the correct options. The important part is to understand the conversation well. Now, questions 25 to 30 want us to match students' comments with the different jobs they talk about. Quickly go through the comments and try to get the main idea of each one. It's important to do this in advance, because otherwise it will be quite challenging to do the matching while you're listening to the recording.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
I enjoyed all that stuff on how technology has changed some jobs and how they're likely to change in the near future.
Yeah, incredible. Like accountants. You might think all the technological innovations would have put them out of a job, but in fact there are more of them than ever.
They're still really in demand and have become far more efficient.
Right. That was amazing. 20 times more accountants in this country compared to the 19th century.
I know. I'd never have thought the demand for hairdressing would have gone up so much in the last 100 years. One hairdresser for every 287 people now, compared to one for over 1,500.
Yeah, because people's earning power has gone up so they can afford to spend more on personal services like that.
But technology hasn't changed the actual job that much.
No, they've got hairdryers, etc., but it's one job where you don't depend on a computer. The kind of work that administrative staff do has changed enormously, thanks to technology. Even 20 years ago, there were secretaries doing dictation and typing.
Yes, really boring compared to these days, when they're given much more responsibility and higher status.
A lot of graduates go in for this kind of work now. I'd expected there to be a much bigger change in the number of agricultural workers in the 19th century, but the 1871 census showed that roughly 25% of the population worked on the land.
Yeah, I'd have assumed it would be more than 50%. Now it's less than 0.2%.
What about care workers?
They barely existed in the 19th century, as people's lifespan was so much shorter. But now, of course, this sector will see huge growth.
Yeah, and it's hard enough to meet current demand. The future looks quite bleak for bank clerks. They've been in decline since ATMs were introduced in the 80s.
And technology will certainly make most of the jobs they do now redundant, I think.
I agree. Although the situation may change, it's very hard to predict what will happen.
That is the end of Part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 3.
The right answers are 25, G, 26, E, 27, B, 28, C, 29, F, 30, A. Finally, the last and the most difficult section. When I say difficult, I mean that the topic of the recording will usually be academic and contain many advanced words. However, what I noticed is that while the lexis of the fourth part is more difficult, the task itself is usually a bit simpler than the task in part 3, for example. If you noticed the same thing, let me know in the comments below. The question type that we have here is note completion. You have to write one word only for each answer. Let's give it a try.
Part 4. You will hear part of a lecture for astronomy students about the need for a system to manage satellites and other objects orbiting the Earth. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
In today's astronomy lecture, I'm going to talk about the need for a system to manage the movement of satellites and other objects in orbit around the Earth. In other words, a space traffic management system. We already have effective air traffic control systems that are used internationally to ensure that planes navigate our skies safely. Well, space traffic management is a similar concept, but focusing on the control of satellites. The aim of such a system would be to prevent the danger of collisions in space between the objects in orbit around the Earth. in order to do this, we'd need to have a set of legal measures, and we'd also have to develop the technical systems to enable us to prevent such accidents. But unfortunately, at present, we don't actually have a space traffic management system that works. So why not? What are the problems in developing such a system? Well, for one thing, satellites are relatively cheap these days compared with how they were in the past, meaning that more people can afford to put them into space. So there's a lot more of them out there, and people aren't just launching single satellites, but whole constellations consisting of thousands of them designed to work together. So space is getting more crowded every day. But in spite of this, one thing you may be surprised to learn is that you can launch a satellite into space, and once it's out there, it doesn't have to send back any information to Earth to allow its identification. So while we have international systems for ensuring we know where the planes in our skies are, and to prevent them from colliding with one another, when it comes to the safety of satellites, at present we don't have anything like enough proper ways of tracking them. And it isn't just entire satellites that we need to consider. A greater threat is the huge amount of space debris in orbit around the Earth, broken bits of satellite and junk from space stations and so on. And some of these are so small that they can be very hard to identify, but they can still be very dangerous. In addition, some operators may be unwilling to share information about the satellites they've launched. For example, a satellite may be designed for military purposes, or it may have been launched for commercial reasons, and the operators don't want competitors to have information about it. And even if the operators are willing to provide it, the information isn't easy to collect. Details are needed about the object itself, as well as about its location at a particular time. And remember that a satellite isn't very big, and it's likely to be moving at thousands of kilometers an hour. We don't have any sensors that can constantly follow something moving so fast. So all that the scientists can do is to put forward a prediction concerning where the satellite is heading next. So those are some of the problems that we're facing. Let's consider now some of the solutions that have been suggested. One key issue is the way in which information is dealt with. We need more information, but it also needs to be accessible at a global level. So we need to establish shared standards that we can all agree on for the way in which this information is presented. We already do this in other areas of science, so although this is a challenge, it's not an impossible task. Then as all this information's collected, it needs to be put together so it can be used, and that will involve creating a single database on which it can be entered. As we continue to push forward new developments, congestion of the space environment is only going to increase. To cope with this, we need to develop a system like the one I've described to coordinate the work of the numerous spacecraft operators. But it's also essential that this system is one that establishes trust in the people that use it, both nationally and at a global level. One interesting development that I'll mention.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4.
(31) Technical. 32, cheap. 33, thousands. 34, identification. 35, tracking. 36, military. 37, location. 38, prediction. 39, database. 40, trust. To follow the information, pay close attention to keywords. At the beginning of the lecture, such keywords are air traffic control, planes, traffic management system, aim, and legal. They guide us to the first answer, technical. Also, expect some words from the notes to be different in the recording. For example, ways, measures, systems. So, if you follow the lecture carefully, pay attention to keywords, and understand the flow of ideas, you'll be able to complete this section without any problems. For this section, it's helpful to know some topic-specific vocabulary, like the words you'd often see when discussing topics such as astronomy, geology, physics, chemistry, biology, and so on. You can do this on the Ology website. If you don't want to read through all the text that Ology has, you can use the Quizlet sets we created in our course for each of these topics. You also want to make sure you spell all the words correctly. So again, use the Fast Fingers website to study the words that you often misspell when doing practice tests. I need to score a 9 out of 9 on the IELTS reading and listening sections, but I have no idea how to do it. One of the main reasons why students can't get high scores on these sections of the test is because their vocabulary is limited. So one thing to do is to study subject-specific vocabulary for subjects like biology, psychology, physics, astronomy, and more. This will definitely help you understand the text better. But is that all? Not really. After studying tons of IELTS practice tests, I've noticed that there are certain words that appear in almost every text or listening passage, and they don't belong to any specific subject. These are words that you can often find in academic articles and texts, and these are the words you'll usually need to answer questions on the IELTS reading and listening. So for this video, I've collected 54 of the most common words you'll see in the IELTS reading and listening sections that will help you achieve the score you want. Take a piece of paper and make 2 columns. In one column, put a plus for the words you know. In the second column, put a minus and write out the word itself to mark the words you don't know. At the end of the video, write winner in the comments if you know all the words, or tell us how many words from the list you know. For example, 30 out of 54, or 52 out of 54. Let's get started. The first word on our list is proponent. This is a person who argues for a cause or proposes an idea. Simply put, a proponent is someone who is in favor of something. We all know the word opponent, a person who opposes an idea. And the word proponent means the opposite. In the reading section, you'll often see passages about the proponents of an idea, policy, or plan. 2. Solely. That's another word for only. You can rely solely on yourself or focus solely on some project. Again, I see this word all the time in both the reading and listening sections. Another popular word on the IELTS test is decade. A decade is a period of 10 years. Number 4, abundant. When something is abundant, it's present in large quantities. For example, let's say a text is about a region with abundant natural resources. It means that there are a lot of natural resources in those regions. You can also find mentions of abundant vegetation or abundant minerals. So when you see the word abundant, remember that it means a lot. We actually have an entire course dedicated to IELTS preparation, where we teach you all the words you need to know to score consistently high on each section of the test. We have lists of words organized by topic that you can study every day on Quizlet, templates for effective speaking and writing responses, strategies for each question type, and more. I'll leave the link to the scores below. 5, roughly, approximately, about, roughly 2,000, about 2,000. The next word is conquer. To conquer is to defeat someone or something, usually by force. You can conquer physical challenges, fears and phobias, illnesses and health issues, knowledge and skills, difficulties and challenges, or social and environmental issues. For example, on IELTS you might see collocations such as to conquer space, poverty, environmental degradation, a new language, public speaking, fear of heights, personal dreams, and more. 7. Vulnerable. A vulnerable person is someone who is easily hurt. However, on IELTS, you'll often see this word used to mean something or someone that is easily influenced or attacked. For example, older people are particularly vulnerable to cold, which means they're influenced or susceptible to cold. Susceptible is another good word with a similar meaning. Customer accounts may be vulnerable to hacking or security risks. Another really popular word is taxonomy. It's mainly used in biology to talk about classifying living organisms, organizing them according to their similarities. For example, the taxonomy of species. You can also see it in other fields where it's used to describe a system for naming and organizing things into groups that share similar qualities. For example, the taxonomy of critical factors, mechanisms, texts, price discrimination, or different forms of aggression. It's often used in question types that involve paraphrasing. So, if the question is about organizing and classifying, watch out for the word taxonomy. 9. Debris. Debris is trash that is scattered around after a disaster, like shattered glass on the road after a car accident. This is debris. 10. Sustainability. This word is repeated hundreds and hundreds of times in both IELTS reading texts and listening transcripts. Sustain means to last over time. So sustainability is the ability of something to last. As a civilization, we're concerned about the sustainability of our planet. You will see passages that mention environmental or ecological sustainability, energy sustainability, financial sustainability, and even space sustainability. So let's say you see the text about space sustainability. You immediately know that similar to sustainability initiatives on Earth, space sustainability is about using the space environment to meet our current needs without compromising the needs of future generations. 11. Amateur. An amateur is a person who does something for pleasure, not for money, such as an amateur who paints as a hobby, but earns a living in another way. Another example is an amateur athlete who might run in local marathons without sponsorship, or an amateur musician who plays in a community band just for fun. 12. Foster. To foster is to encourage the development or growth of something. This could be relationships, skills, or even ideas. Typical IELTS collocations include foster innovation, unity, collaboration, the development of something, the growth of something, or creativity. For example, a teacher might foster creativity in students by encouraging them to think outside the box. Likewise. Likewise means similarly. 14. Deploy. The primary meaning of deploy is to move troops or equipment into position for military action, as in, a military commander might deploy troops in preparation for battle. But on IELTS, we often see this word used in the sense of bringing something into effective action. A similar meaning to use, utilize, employ, or exploit. For instance, a company might deploy new technology to improve efficiency. Common collocations include deploy resources, deploy technology, and deploy strategies. 15. Tackle. The verb to tackle means to make a determined effort to deal with a problem or a difficult task. You can tackle a problem, tackle an issue, or tackle a challenge. It's also a great word for the IELTS writing section. 16. Redundant. No longer needed or useful. This word can describe unnecessary information or situations where jobs are cut because they're no longer needed. Common collocations are redundant employees, redundant information, or make redundant. 17. Apparently. Apparently is an adverb meaning evidently or obviously. After his 6th hot dog, you might say to your friend, well, apparently someone was hungry. When reading, you'll often see collocations like apparently true, apparently not, or apparently obvious. 18. Contaminate. To make poisonous, to pollute. For instance, chemicals can contaminate water supplies, or bacteria can contaminate food. You will often see the word contamination, which is often used as a synonym for pollution. The next two phrases that IELTS content creators love are steer away from and steer clear of. They can be considered synonyms, and both of them mean to avoid something or someone. Her speech steered clear of controversial issues, or he decided to steer away from trouble. 20. Otherwise. We use otherwise after a command or a suggestion to show what the result will be if you don't follow an idea. You'd better write it down, otherwise you'll forget it. It can also mean differently or in another way. The police believe he's the thief, but all the evidence suggests otherwise, that he is not. 21. Assess. To evaluate. 22. Compile. To gather information from different sources and put it together. For example, a researcher might compile data from various studies, or an editor might compile articles for a publication. You can compile a report or compile a list. 23. Property. Property often means something that you own or have, such as land, buildings, or goods. In the IELTS reading section, it's often used to describe a quality of a substance or material. For example, one of the properties of copper is that it conducts heat and electricity very well. So it's the characteristic or quality of copper to conduct heat and electricity. 24. Generate. To generate means to produce or create something, often used in the context of energy, ideas, or income. 25. Threat. A person or thing likely to cause damage or danger is called a threat. Climate change is a global threat. Likewise, a competitor can be a threat to a company. 26. Target. A target is something to shoot at, either real or figurative. If you're an archer, you aim for the bullseye on the target. If you are selling cars for a living, you probably have a sales target to hit. You can use this word both as a noun and as a verb. For instance, a company might set a sales target, or marketing campaigns can target specific audiences. 27. Vigorous. Strong, healthy, and full of energy. 28. Guidelines. General rules, principles, or pieces of advice. For example, the organization has issued guidelines for people who work with prisoners. 29. A byproduct. A byproduct is something produced in the process of making something else. This term is often used in manufacturing or environmental contexts. You will also need it in the writing task 1 when describing diagrams. For example, sawdust is a byproduct of cutting wood, or heat can be a byproduct of chemical reactions. 30. Promote. To promote means to support or actively encourage something, such as a cause, product, or idea. 31. An outbreak. A sudden occurrence of something undesirable, for example, a disease or a conflict. We often use the word outbreak to describe events that spread quickly and widely. 32. Retention. You can use retention to mean the ability to keep or hold something. On the IELTS, retention often means the continued use, existence, or possession of something or someone. For example, water or heat retention, information retention, memory retention, customer retention. 33. Abide by, to accept and follow a rule, decision, or recommendation. Again, one of the favorite words of the IELTS makers. I see it all the time in the reading passages. You can abide by rules, laws, or a decision. 34. Resilience, the ability to recover quickly from difficulties. A resilient community is the one that can rebuild itself quickly after a disaster. Now, personal resilience helps someone cope with stress. Imagine a tennis ball that you throw at the wall and it bounces back. The same way a resilient person bounces back from difficulties. 35. Decline, to decrease in strength, quality, or importance. Remember 3 words that begin with a D and have a similar meaning: decline, decrease, and diminish. You will also need them for writing task 1. You can witness an economic decline or a decline in sales. 36. Foreseeable. If you know something's coming, it's foreseeable. The adjective foreseeable most often turns up in the phrase the foreseeable future, which basically means as far in the future as I can predict. So the foreseeable future means the near or predictable future. 37. Outline. To outline means to give a summary of the main points or structure of something. You can outline a plan, outline your steps, or outline your proposal. For example, a teacher might outline the key topics for an exam, or a business plan might outline the company's strategy. So to outline means to roughly describe. Remember, we've just discussed the word roughly, approximately, or give the main points or a summary of something. 38. Stem from, to be caused by something or someone, or to come from something or someone. The sentence, her problems stem from a lack of confidence, suggests that insecurity is the underlying cause. 39. A range of, a variety of, a diversity of, an array of. All these words mean that there is a broad selection of options. 40. Database. Lots of IELTS reading passages use this word. A database collects information and resources, usually on a common subject. Some databases collect newspapers, others focus on legal issues. The police use databases to track criminals. Anywhere there is information being collected, there is probably a database keeping track of it all. 41. Ultimately. In the end. Finally. One more word is enormously. It means greatly or to a very large degree. Think of the word enormous. It means huge. So if you say that the project was enormously successful, it was hugely or very successful. Things can be enormously successful, enormously popular, or enormously important. This word is enormously important for your IELTS test. 43. Designate. This word can mean to officially choose someone to do a job. He was designated as their team captain. Or to officially say that a place or thing has a particular character or purpose. The area was designated as a national park. 44. Incorporate. To incorporate is to include or integrate a part into the whole. Think of 3 words that begin with an I. Incorporate, include, integrate. They are slightly different, of course, but the general meaning is the same. Incorporate is a more active version of the word include. When you incorporate, you add something to the mix. The new policy incorporates employee feedback. 45. Literate. Able to read and write. You can be computer literate or highly literate. We may also encounter the idea of literate population in the reading passages. 46. Correlate. To have a mutual relationship or a connection between 2 or more things. Higher education levels correlate with the better job prospects. 47. The 2 phrases that are also quite popular in British English are years to come generations to come. They mean the future years or future generations. 48. Congestion. Congestion often refers to overcrowding, usually of traffic or people, causing delays and difficulties. The most common collocation with this word is traffic congestion. Another super popular word, not only on the IELTS test, but also on the TOEFL test, is timber. It's wood used for construction. Collision. A collision happens when one moving object strikes violently against another, often resulting in damage. So, there is a crash. We often use this word to describe traffic accidents, but it can also apply to other contexts. For example, satellite collisions in space. Anything where there is a crash is a collision. 51. Habitat. This word is also super popular in many IELTS texts and listening recordings. A habitat is the natural home or environment of an animal, plant, or other organism. It's a place where a species live and grow. The forest is a habitat for many species. On the IELTS, you'll often see natural habitat, habitat destruction, or wildlife habitat mentioned. 52. Issue. Problem. For example, there seems to be an issue with the production schedule. 53. Cope with. To deal effectively with something difficult, like stress, challenges, or changes. He's trying to cope with being fired so soon after being hired. Finally, the last word in our list is preserve. To preserve means to keep something as it is, especially to prevent it from being damaged or destroyed. You can try to preserve the environment, wood, timber, nature, traditions, or indigenous languages. While many people think that the IELTS writing section is the most difficult section of the test, there are hundreds and hundreds of students who struggle with the reading section. In fact, 1 in every 3 students I see in my one-on-one sessions can't achieve their target score in this particular section. And there are a couple of reasons for that. In today's lesson, I decided to talk about 10 essential things you should do to ace the IELTS reading section. But first, let's start with some typical problems that don't allow you to get a high score. The first and most important mistake is that very few students actually work on developing their reading skills. No matter how many strategies and techniques you learn, if your reading level is poor, you'll have a hard time getting a high score in this section. The second most common mistake is not studying the question types. I'm not saying that you can't score high on the test without knowing every single question type and the strategy for it. In fact, I've seen students do that. But it's absolutely true that studying the types of questions you'll see on the test and how to approach them correctly will save you a lot of time and nerves and allow you to get a higher score. Finally, many students forget that practice is key. To become familiar with the test and its format, it's important that you take at least a few practice tests before your exam. Of course, it all depends on your level of English. If your level is advanced, you'll need to practice less than a student with an intermediate level of English. However, by doing many full-length reading practice tests, you can 1. Really master the reading strategies and adapt them to your needs. 2. Improve your timing. 3. Become familiar with the format and structure of the test. And 4. Feel less anxious on test day if your IELTS exam is coming up and you need a guide to help you prepare for it successfully. You can check out our IELTS preparation book. We've carefully gathered the information you need to succeed in IELTS in a clear, easy to understand, and fun way. You'll master the types of questions in the reading section and important reading techniques. Learn strategies for all question types. Find out how to improve your listening skills, ace the writing section, and develop your speaking skills. We've also added an extra chapter to review the necessary grammar and vocabulary to help you with both the writing and speaking sections. and another with test day tips and strategies. Each chapter is followed by review quizzes to make sure you retain all the information. The promo code link is in the description below. So, what should you do to ace the IELTS reading section? The very first thing you need to do is learn the structure of the section. Think about it. Before you do anything important in your life, you want to know what to expect. The same applies for the IELTS prep. In the IELTS reading section, you'll have 60 minutes to complete 40 questions. There are 3 sections on the reading test, so you want to spend no more than 20 minutes on each section. However, as the test progresses, the sections increase in difficulty. So, make sure you spend less time on the first section, a little more on the second, and even more on the third. Second, make sure to take a full-length reading test to estimate your current score. This will help you understand where your preparation begins and what your major challenges are. Third, on the day of the test, don't spend too much time on one question. You can totally do it when you practice, especially if you just started and some question types are still relatively new for you. However, if you find a question particularly difficult on test day, don't dwell on it for too long. Move on to the next question and come back to it later if you have time. Number 4, work on your reading skills. IELTS reading tests skills such as skimming, scanning, and reading for detail. Practicing these skills is a very important aspect of the test, which, as I said, is often forgotten by students. They might spend hours trying to figure out the best tips and tricks to help them get a high score, while they tend to forget that it's their reading skills that are being tested in the first place. Let's quickly review what skimming, scanning, and reading for detail mean. Skimming, which some people call skim reading, is when you quickly look through a text to get a general idea of what it's about. Imagine you're reading a very interesting book, and there are only a few chapters left. However, it's after 3 a.m. and you should have been in bed a few hours ago. But you still want to know where the main characters will end up. So you'll quickly flip through the pages, trying to get the main idea. And that's called skimming. We often use skimming to get the main idea out of a long text that you don't want to read. Now, scan reading, or scanning, is quickly searching the text for specific information or keywords. You don't read everything. Instead, you look for keywords, phrases, or numbers that match what you're looking for. Imagine you're trying to find a phone number in a directory. You don't read every name, you just scan until you find the one you want. So scanning is valuable when you need to quickly find specific details in a text, such as names, dates, and so on. Another skill is reading for detail. This is when you carefully read the necessary part of the text to fully understand it. Reading for detail is something you'll need to do for many question types. Let's say we have a true, false, not given question. You'll first look at the first statement given and try to figure out its main idea. Then you'll identify keywords and think of possible paraphrases and synonyms for the rest of the words. As with any skill, I recommend practicing reading techniques as much as possible. For example, you can use the University of Victoria's Continuing Studies website to get great timed reading exercises for both skimming and scanning. Just choose the exercise you want to do and start practicing. Another good practice is to read texts and summarize them. You can use the ACE Reader service for this. Just choose the story you are interested in, read through it quickly, and then check out the comprehension questions. Finally, summarize the story in detail. See how much you can recall. I love this site because it gives you different levels of texts, which means you can start with easier ones and then move on to harder ones. Now that we've talked about mastering reading skills, Another important thing to remember is to study question types and their strategies. For example, in a summary completion question, you should start by carefully analyzing the incomplete sentences before reading the text. Analyze the key words and think of possible paraphrases, and then scan the text to find the answer. Number 6. Study synonyms. Sentence completion, true, false, not given, and many other types of questions require you to know synonyms for various words. Knowing synonyms helps you predict the correct answers and improves your understanding of the text. I usually create matching tasks for my students where they have to organize words and their synonyms into groups. You can use vocabulary.com to learn synonyms. It provides great word explanations, along with a list of the most common synonyms. You can also play games on the ABCYA website or the Bamboozle website. Let's do a little test. In the comments below, write down as many synonyms as you can think of for the word important. The more you remember, the better. 7. Don't forget to practice. By practicing, you can refine the reading strategies you've learned and even tweak them a bit to maximize your score. For example, there are 2 ways to approach the matching headings question. You can read the headings first and then the text, or you can read the text first and then look at the headings. Personally, I use the first strategy more often, as do most of my students. However, I've had a few people who prefer to read the text first and then look at the headings. There is no right or wrong way to do this. Both strategies are perfectly acceptable, and the important thing is which one works best for you. This is why practice is so important. 8. This is another thing I often ask students to do in one-on-one sessions. When you first start practicing, verbalize all the steps you take to approach each type of question. For example, now I'm going to read the statement and understand its main idea. The main idea is 10, 10, 10. Now I'm going to analyze the keywords. I think they are 10, 10, 10, and so on. This will not only help you remember the strategy, but it will also allow you to understand what takes the most time and where you tend to stumble. As I just mentioned, knowing what skill each question tests and how to approach it effectively will help you achieve a high score much faster than just taking practice tests. For IELTS reading, you should focus especially on academic vocabulary, which is 570 words long, advanced vocabulary, and subject-specific vocabulary. 9. Expand your vocabulary. You can expand your vocabulary through extensive and intensive reading. Extensive reading is when you read a lot of material quickly, focusing on understanding the main idea rather than every detail. Intensive reading, on the other hand, involves reading deeply and carefully, focusing on understanding every word and detail. To improve your vocabulary, you will definitely want to do more intensive reading. However, you can combine the two for even better results. I remember when I was studying Italian, I'd start by reading a book I was very interested in without translating any words, trying to understand as much as I could. I would read very quickly, concentrating only on the main ideas. Then, I read the same book again, but this time I didn't rush and translated many words I didn't know. You can also use these new words to summarize what you've read. You'd be surprised, but it will expand your vocabulary a lot. Also, you'll remember the new words better because you're learning them in context, not just memorizing lists. Just make sure you choose interesting content. If you're a fan of vocabulary lists, try vocabulary.com or Quizlet. Finally, always give yourself less time than IELTS allows. This will help you develop good time management skills. When you're practicing at home, you're less stressed than when you are in a test center. So make sure you can complete each section faster than necessary. For example, instead of setting the timer for 60 minutes, set it for 45 to 50 minutes. That way, you'll never run out of time on test day and you'll be much less anxious. I have no idea how to get a high score on IELTS reading. Every single time I do a practice test, I get a low score. I can't finish the section on time. I'm so confused by all these advanced words. How am I supposed to know things about space, engineering, psychology, or economics in English? I know all the strategies, but still make mistakes when it comes to doing practice tests. What should I do? These are just a few questions IELTS students usually have when it comes to the reading section. As part of the IELTS prep course we created, I give consultations to students where I evaluate their speaking and writing. But in about 50% of cases, students who come to these sessions ask us to focus on the reading instead, because they 1. Can't consistently get the score they need, 2. Fail to finish all the questions on time, 3. Don't understand the academic words the IELTS reading section bombards them with, and 4. Can't effectively use the strategies they learned for every question type. Today, we'll analyze one passage from the IELTS reading section so that you can see for yourself that this section is not as scary as it may seem. We'll analyze the question types, check out the strategies for them, and most importantly, learn how to apply these strategies on real tests. If you're watching this video now and want to learn the templates to score high on IELTS speaking and writing, click on this link. You can choose the Pro package if you want to get your essays and speaking responses evaluated. I personally consider this option the most helpful, as I'll tell you what you specifically are doing wrong and what you should do differently to get a higher score. The thing is, I often see students with a good level of English who could have scored high, but they just do the wrong things and keep scoring low. And very often, there are just a few little things that stand between them and getting the score they really deserve. Now, on the day of the test, you'll have 3 passages with questions after each. Usually, the first text is the easiest, and they progressively get more difficult. For example, look at these passages. I took them from Cambridge Prep Book 18. The first text is about urban farming, which is a difficult topic, but not very difficult. The second one is about forest management in Pennsylvania, a bit more challenging. And finally, the last text is about conquering Earth's space junk problem. Much more challenging, isn't it? So today, let's do this last and most difficult passage. The first thing to do is to read the title and the lead. For those who don't know, the lead is the first 2 to 3 sentences that give you a quick preview of the content and grab your interest. It usually explains the main points or what the article will cover. Satellites, rocket shards, and collision debris are creating major traffic risks in orbit around the planet. Researchers are working to reduce these threats. Simply put, space junk, like old satellites and rocket parts, is making it crowded and dangerous around Earth. Scientists are trying to find ways to reduce this problem. Now, let's go to the questions. Some students prefer to read the text first to get a better understanding of it. Feel free to do this if you're a fast reader. If you aren't, it's better to look at the questions first. We have matching paragraph information, summary completion, and matching features question types. Lots of matching will be on our agenda today. For the record, many students find matching questions the hardest because they test your overall understanding of the information you read. If you are new to all these question types and want to learn a perfect strategy for each one, click on this link to get access to our IELTS prep course. We'll teach you everything you need to know to consistently get high scores on IELTS reading. The first 5 questions. In this section, you should match the information given with the paragraphs. Remember that the answers can be anywhere in the passage. Let's analyze what information we'll be matching. It's important to do this before turning to the text, so that you know what to look for when reading. Now, that's one reason why I don't suggest reading the text first if your level is not very good. Imagine you've just tried reading this text. There will be tons of unfamiliar words and difficult concepts. You'll waste time trying to understand everything. And then, for this particular question, you'll need to read this text once again to find the given information. So, as I said earlier, it's better to start reading, keeping in mind what you're looking for. As I read, I try to predict what kind of paragraph I'll expect to find. 27. A reference to the cooperation that takes place to try and minimize risk. I'll be looking for a paragraph that mentions a cooperation between different parties to minimize risk. 28. An explanation of a person's aims. A paragraph containing this information should mention an individual and why he or she has certain goals. Again, we're not looking for keywords, just the concepts. 29. A description of a major collision that occurred in space. This paragraph should describe a big collision that happened in space. A collision is a crash. Occurred means happened. 30. A comparison between tracking objects in space and the efficiency of a transportation system. This paragraph will compare tracking objects in space to a transportation system. So you'll want to see the transportation system mentioned. 31. A reference to efforts to classify space junk. This sentence shows that the paragraph should mention what people or companies are trying to do to classify space junk. To classify is to arrange in classes or categories. There is also another word for this, taxonomy. It's very popular in IELTS. It means the practice and science of categorization or classification. So watch out for it. To recap, 27. Mention cooperation. 28. Explain a person's goals. 29. Describe a big crash. 30. Compare to a transportation system. 31. Mention attempts to classify space junk. Taxonomy. As you can see, the goal is to simplify each piece of information and predict what you're looking for. Now, let's get back to the text. As you read through it, don't focus on the words you don't know or difficult concepts. Instead, try to extract the main idea. We learned that they sent more than 400 satellites into orbit, 4 times more than in the previous 10 years. A decade is a period of 10 years, and these numbers can increase even further. Nothing relevant for now. Then I see that all that traffic can lead to disaster. 10 years ago, a US commercial satellite smashed into an inactive Russian satellite, and it created thousands of new pieces of space shrapnel. Smashed. They smashed into each other. So there was a crash. Further down the paragraph, I have another important line. Satellite operators can't steer away from every potential crash. This means that this paragraph describes a major collision that occurred in space. So 29 is A. Good. Let's keep reading. The number of objects in orbit is increasing, so researchers are investigating or studying ways to solve this problem. Rise equals increase. Attack the problem equals solve or tackle the problem. Several teams are trying to improve methods for assessing what's in orbit so that satellite operators can work more effectively. Efficiently equals effectively. Some researchers collect a lot of information on where everything is in orbit. Compile equals put together, like put in a pile. Massive data equals a lot of information. Others are developing taxonomies of space debris. So this paragraph is about different ways to classify space junk. So 31 is B. Let's move on. In paragraph C, we learned that our ability to monitor space objects increases, and so does the total number of items in orbit. So companies, governments, and other players in space are collaborating or cooperating to avoid a shared threat. Threat is synonymous to danger. We then see some examples of international groups and what they do, and intergovernmental groups and what they advise. So they are talking about cooperation to solve the problem, which means that 27, a reference to the cooperation that takes place to try and minimize risk, is C. Again, remember that you don't want to focus on words you don't understand. Instead, focus on the words you know and try to extract the main idea. This will save you a lot of time. Moving on, paragraph D is about scientists trying to solve or tackle the problem of space junk. Tackle is a very popular word in IELTS. It means to make efforts to deal with a problem or a task. They try to find out where all the debris is. So for those who don't know, debris is the remains of something that has been destroyed or broken up. So it's trash that is usually scattered around after a disaster. The idea that is repeated in this paragraph is that if you know precisely where space debris is, you will be able to fly without hitting it. We don't have any of the information given in this paragraph, so let's skip it. Section E begins with the sentence. The field is called space traffic management because it's similar to managing traffic on the roads or in the air. And then they provide an example illustrating this comparison. I don't need to go into detail because it's already clear that 30 is E. This paragraph makes a comparison between tracking objects in space and the efficiency of a transportation system. Watch out for paraphrases. Transportation system, managing traffic on the roads or in the air. Now, F covers an additional problem, which is that there is no authoritative catalog that lists the orbits of all known space debris. We then learn about how this problem is illustrated by Ja through his web-based database. There is a detailed explanation of how the database works. Then we see that he describes himself as a space environmentalist. He says, I want to make space a place that is safe to operate, that is free and useful for generations to come. For the record, generations to come means future generations. I want shows us that it's his goal or aim. So 28 is F. As you can see, when we know how to analyze the statements effectively and what to look for in the text, matching the information to the right paragraph is not that difficult. During my one-on-one sessions, I often see students who struggle with the reading section, and they think they'll never master it. What we usually do is go through a couple of reading passages together, so that I can correct their strategy. And what's interesting is that every single student usually says like, whoa, I didn't know it's that simple. I thought the reading section was much harder. So obviously, your success depends on your vocabulary, but it's also largely about how well you know what to do and how fast you can do it. You should approach this section mechanically, like a robot, and know 100% what to do next. So let's proceed to the second part of the task, questions 32 to 35. You need to complete the summary with only one word. This question type is usually a bit easier, as you can use keywords to help you locate the right answers. Now, I already have a pretty good understanding of at least the first part of the text, which will be of extra help. I start by reading the summary and identify keywords to help me locate the right answers. As I read, I also try to get a general understanding of the summary. I can also use grammar to help me predict the right answers. Let's begin. The committee gives advice on how the blank of space can be achieved. The keyword is committee. All the other words in this sentence might be changed. The word committee is the only one that will most likely remain the same. I see the definite article before the blank, so the answer is a noun. For example, it could be the exploration of space. Let's look at the text. I remember reading about the committee before. Here is the sentence. International groups, such as the Interagency Space Debris Coordination Committee, have developed guidelines on space sustainability. Guidelines equals advice. Space sustainability equals the blank of space. So the right answer is sustainability. Again, always expect to find paraphrases and synonyms. So your strategy is first find keywords to locate the part to read, and then read this part carefully to find the answer, 33 to 34. The committee advises that when satellites are no longer active, any unused blank or pressurized material that could cause blank should be removed. It's still about the committee, so I'll stick to the same part of the text. Answers 33 and 34 are nouns. Let's find this information in the text. Those include inactivating satellites at the end of their useful life by venting pressurized materials or leftover fuel that might lead to explosions. For answer 33, I'm looking for something unused. The answer is fuel. Leftover means remaining, so leftover fuel is the fuel that hasn't been used. 34 is about what leftover fuel or pressurized material could cause. So, the correct answer is explosions. Finally, 35. Holger Krag points out that the operators that become blank are unlikely to prioritize removing their satellites from space. This part is about Holger Krag, so I should check out the parts of the text that mention him. The answer will most likely be an adjective. The keywords in this sentence are operators, satellite constellations, stewards of space, and satellites. As I keep reading the same paragraph, I find information about Holger Krag. I also see many of the keywords. The part I should pay close attention to is this. But Krag worries that problems could increase despite their best intentions. What happens to those that fail or go bankrupt? He asks. They're probably not going to spend money to remove their satellites from space. That's the part I need. The operators that become bankrupt. So bankrupt is our answer. Again, as you can see, the whole process is very mechanical. You use keywords to locate the right part of the text. You then read this part carefully and determine the right answer. You also expect synonyms and paraphrases for the majority of the words. And focus on the main idea of the sentence. Part 2, done. Finally, questions 36 to 40 are another matching task. This time, you need to match each statement with the correct person. I'll start by analyzing the statements first. Then I will locate all parts of the text mentioning these people. Then I will do the matching. 36. Knowing the exact location of space junk would help prevent any possible danger. Important information, exact location, help prevent danger. 37. Space should be available to everyone and should be preserved for the future. Important information, space, available to everyone, saved for the future. Preserve equals save. 38. A recommendation regarding satellites is widely ignored. Recommendation or advice, ignored by many people. 39. There is conflicting information about where some satellites are in space. Conflicting information, like arguments, disagreements, the location of satellites in space. 40. There is a risk we won't be able to undo the damage that occurs in space. Chance or risk won't undo the damage, happens in space. Occur equals happen equals take place. Now let's go through the text, searching for names and match them with their statements. First is Carolyn Frew. She says, if we go on like this, we'll reach a point of no return. This means that we won't be able to undo the damage. So 40 is A. Then comes Holger Krag. We've already read this piece quite attentively, so we remember that he was worried about operators going bankrupt and not spending money on removing their satellites. To learn more, let's read this part. The intergovernmental groups also advise lowering satellites deep enough into the atmosphere that they will burn up or disintegrate within 25 years. But so far, only about half of all missions have abided by this 25-year goal. Abide by is to follow the rules. So, a recommendation regarding satellites is widely ignored. 38 is B. Next is Marlon Sorge. If you knew precisely where everything was, you would almost never have a problem. 36 is C. Moving on to Mariba Jha. He was comparing space traffic management with managing traffic on the roads or in the air. We read that air traffic controllers know the location of the planes down to 1 meter in accuracy. The same can't be said for space debris. Not all objects in orbit are known, and even those included in databases are not tracked consistently. Also, as we go on, we see that he was describing the results of the database he has developed. It uses several sources, such as catalogs maintained by the US and Russian governments, to visualize where objects in space are. But this doesn't quite work for a number of objects. When he enters the number, the database draws 2 purple lines. So the 2 sources contain 2 completely different orbits for the same object. This information is conflicting. This means that 39, there is conflicting information about where some satellites are in space, is D. We are left with only one statement. 37. Space should be available to everyone and should be preserved for the future. It will also be D. As we read before, Jha wants to make space a place where it's safe to operate, that is free and useful for generations to come. One of the reasons why so many students struggle with the IELTS speaking section is that they don't fully understand what the examiners are looking for in order to achieve a high score. Some use too much slang and filler words. Others make their answers too complicated by using formal cohesive devices and vocabulary. There are also those who think that using idiomatic language means including an idiom in every sentence they say. I've seen test takers who don't elaborate enough on their ideas, especially in part 3, and those who give too much detail in part 1. Let me know in the comments if you do any of these, by the way. The problem is that none of these things will allow you to score higher than a 6 or 6.5. If you want to get a higher score, your first step should be to get a very clear understanding of what is expected of you. That's why today I've decided to give you not only tips on how to do better on the IELTS speaking section, but also to highlight the essential aspects that you need to keep in mind in order to score 7+ on the IELTS speaking section. We'll start with a brief introduction to the IELTS speaking section, where I'll remind you what this part of the test looks like. Then, we'll analyze what the examiners expect from you on test day and look at strategies and techniques for scoring high. The IELTS speaking section is divided into 3 parts. In part 1, you'll be asked questions on 2 different topics related to your life. In part 2, you'll have 1 to 2 minutes to speak on a given topic. Part 3 lasts 4 to 5 minutes and contains more questions related to the main topic of part 2. You'll have to give longer answers, often up to 1 minute or more, with more elaboration. As you can see, the 2 speaking formats in which you need to excel are the interview and the monologue. This means that you should be good at creating effective 1 to 2 minute speeches and answering questions in a precise and natural way. If you want your speaking and writing to be assessed, you can join our IELTS preparation course, and I will tell you what you need to do to get a high score. The promo code link is in the description below. Now, sounding natural is the very first thing I want us to focus on. As you probably all know by now, in order to get a high score on the IELTS speaking test, you should sound natural. But what does that mean? Well, you obviously don't want to be too formal. For example, you don't want to use formal linking words like furthermore, to exemplify, hence, and so on. You also don't want to sound too mechanical, like a robot, especially like a very scared robot that is afraid of making the slightest mistake And when it does, it's so scared that it cannot say a word or starts stuttering uncontrollably. However, I have noticed that when I tell this to my students, I often get super informal responses, full of slang and filler words. So while you need to sound natural and not too formal, using slang and too many filler words will hurt your score. What about filler words, you may ask? Should I use them in my responses or not? Well, if you just sprinkle a few relevant filler words into your answers to fill in the gaps while you think, that's totally fine. For example, adding words like, well, like, actually, seriously, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, clearly is possible, but in very small doses. If you feel like you're overusing them, which a lot of students do, you should try to avoid them. Saying like 20 times in an answer will only lower your score. However, you can definitely use filler words, or even better, time-consuming phrases that give you some time to think about the question. This will ensure that you don't pause or hesitate too much. Even if the question is challenging and you don't know what to say, keep talking rather than panicking or staying silent for too long. For example, you can say, "That's a difficult question. Let me think about it." "That's an interesting question. I haven't thought about it before. It's been so long since I thought about it, but my guess would be that." You can also correct yourself when you make a mistake. You can say, "What I mean is that." "What I actually meant was," "What I'm trying to say is that." So, tip number 1, control your language. Avoid being too formal or too informal. Don't use slang or formal cohesive devices. Also, don't use too many filler words. Record yourself answering questions and giving monologues and then listen to them. If you hear too many filler words, cut them out. Then answer the same question again and try to control your speech. Also, try to avoid saying and ah. If you do it once, there is nothing wrong with it. But if you have too many of these sounds, your fluency score will be lowered. This is why our tip number 2 is to generate ideas for IELTS speaking topics. Most of the time, we need filler words and ums when we have nothing to say. For example, you're asked to give a monologue about your favorite perfume. Let's say you've never used perfume in your life. Would it be easy for you to start talking fluently about this topic on the spot? Will you be able to minimize pauses and hesitations? I don't think so. But if you prepare in advance and brainstorm ideas, you'll feel much more confident and you'll certainly score higher. To practice, take 2 to 3 recent IELTS speaking topics every day and try to answer them. If the question is easy, just skim it and move on to the next one. However, if the question is challenging, take your time to think about what you can say. This will make you much better prepared for test day. You might think that native speakers use filler words and ums and ums all the time. If I have to sound like a native speaker, why can't I do the same? Thing is, the IELTS speaking test is not about being as fluent as a native speaker. Many native speakers can ace the test on their first try and don't score higher than a 7. If you want to reach the top, like a band 9, you should speak like a person who has been educated to graduate level at a university where English is the language of study. You can watch university students and graduates answer questions on random topics. There are many such interviews on YouTube. For example, let's look at one of them.
Degrees from universities like Oxford do is give you sort of that rubber stamp approval on your CV to tell corporations that you are like one of them.
We actually need more people with vocational skills. People who are doing medicine here, they're going to make like £12 an hour. Plumbers, they make so much money because we don't have enough plumbers.
Given my degree, even if I went into a job, I don't think I would be able to pay it off quickly enough.
As you can see, they had some fillers in their answers, but not too many. So again, using fillers now and then is perfectly normal and won't hurt your score. But if you overdo it and disturb the flow of your ideas, it will lower your score, especially in the fluency and coherence part. Which brings us to tip number 3. If you want to score 8, 8.5 or 9 on the IELTS speaking section, you need to take your speaking skills to another level. So make sure you expose yourself to as much correct and fine English as possible. The best way to do this is to watch videos and podcasts. Podcasts will help you prepare for answering parts 1 and 3 because they show how people answer questions naturally. Watching videos gives you a better idea of ideal fluency and speaking speed. So be sure to watch some to prepare for part 2. Some good podcasts and videos I would suggest are 1. Ali Abdaal's YouTube channel and his Deep Dive podcast. Ali is a Cambridge graduate and he covers a lot of interesting topics on his channels. He has an amazing vocabulary and varied grammar, so it's a great pleasure to listen to him. What I love about the vocabulary he uses is that it's exactly what you need for the IELTS speaking test. Not too formal, but not too informal either. As you watch a video or podcast, write down 5 to 10 new words and then try to summarize what you've learned using those words. For example, while watching this video, I wrote down something like this: genuinely, life-changing skills, in our side hustle, to be fully present, we are bombarded by distractions, endless options, incredibly important to cultivate the ability to focus over the years, is directly proportional to, I was burning the midnight oil, I was feeling really overwhelmed, doing an extra degree, and that's just from watching the first minute and a half of the video. You can also check out the podcast Rise Life Stories of Accomplished Individuals, hosted by Gary Lipovetsky, who is an entrepreneur and business owner. In the podcast, Gary digs deep into the lives of interesting people, uncovering the challenges they faced along the way and extracting their knowledge and expertise. Again, I love the language used by both the host and the guests. I think you can learn a lot of vocabulary that will help you to improve your IELTS score for any section. I especially like the topic-specific vocabulary you can get from each podcast. 2 other channels I'd recommend are Unjaded Jade and Ruby Granger. The girls are also amazing. Their speaking skills are very good, and if you listen to them long enough, you'll soon find yourself using many of the expressions and phrases they use in their videos. Working on expanding your vocabulary in this way will ensure you can use it with full flexibility and precision in all areas. Tip number 5, don't learn lists of words for each speaking topic. You probably think this is something you should do as you go through the IELTS speaking questions. Instead, what I often see from my students in our one-on-one sessions is that when they try to forcefully add certain words to their answers, they end up losing their fluency and make mistakes. So one thing you should do is expand your vocabulary in general by watching videos and podcasts and exposing yourself to as much quality English as possible. Another thing is to go through the typical and latest IELTS speaking question types. When you do this, just think about the answer you'd give in your native language and look up the words you might be missing. That's it. Tip number 6. Don't force too many idioms and phrasal verbs into your answers. Let's listen carefully to a small clip from Ruby's video to get an idea of what I'm talking about.
And the streets were looking beautiful. Honestly, I've missed Oxford so much. I can't tell you how much I've missed the city. And that's also coming as somebody who really does not like cities. I never imagined myself being excited to go back to a city.
Hello, it's Ruby and good morning. I'm back in Oxford now for Hilary term, which is the 2nd term. And I went to the library this morning just to do some personal reading and journaling. Grabbed a coffee. Yes, I am mad because it's an iced Americano, but I really just prefer iced coffee.
This was a perfect example of using idiomatic vocabulary. As you can see, she didn't bombard us with idioms or phrasal verbs in every sentence. In fact, idiomatic language is natural in expression and correct without being too formal. So one more reason to commit to quality English is to sound idiomatic without too many idioms. Actually, idiomatic vocabulary really helps in the speaking section. because it allows you to get the same message across in a faster and more natural way. For example, what's the word we use to describe something that really annoys us? We use the word pet peeve. Smoking is one of my pet peeves. I hate it when people smoke around me. Another example is a soft-spoken person. That's the person who has a quiet or gentle voice. Some people have a loud voice, some people have a soft voice, and these people are soft-spoken. Tip number 7, avoid saying a lot in part 1, but elaborate more on your ideas in part 3. While in part 1, you should only give a few sentences in response. In part 3, you should include many examples and explanations. Part 3 of the IELTS speaking is specifically designed to provide you with the opportunity to discuss topics related to part 2 in much greater depth. This part of the test focuses on your ability to express and justify opinions, and to analyze, discuss, and speculate about issues. The examiner will help you do this by asking you questions that explore the topic area in more depth. If you do not expand on the questions in part 3, the examiner may think that your vocabulary is limited. So, be prepared for the examiner to encourage you to keep talking and see how much you can explore the topic. Let's review briefly before moving on to the next few tips. To get a high score for fluency and coherence, you should speak fluently with only rare repetition or self-correction. Make only content-related hesitations, rather than to find words or grammar. Speak coherently with fully appropriate, cohesive features. Develop topics fully and appropriately. For lexical resource, make sure you use vocabulary with full flexibility and precision in all topics. Use idiomatic language naturally and accurately. As you may have guessed, these are the criteria that IELTS examiners use to assess your performance. There are actually 4 such criteria: fluency and coherence, lexical resource, grammatical range and accuracy, and pronunciation. For grammatical range and accuracy, you should use a full range of structures naturally and appropriately, and produce consistently accurate structures apart from slips. So tip 8 is to use different grammar structures in your answers. Now, the important thing is not only to use a variety of grammar structures, but also to use them naturally and appropriately. According to IDP IELTS, it's important that you can match the grammar structure with the appropriate function. For example, if you're describing the situation in your country, you can use present, perfect, and past tenses. When thinking about the future, you should consider introducing conditionals, future tenses, and modal verbs, such as may, might, should, could, and so on. This brings us to tip number 9. Drill grammar. To make any grammatical construction sound natural, you should make it an integral part of your speech. This means that you should first drill the forms, and then learn and practice ways to use that construction successfully. What I do with my IELTS students is that I carefully observe their speech, note their weaknesses and the constructions they should adopt, and then we repeat each construction over and over again until it becomes so ingrained in their minds that they start using it without thinking, just like they do in their native language. Listening to podcasts and audiobooks in English also helps a lot, because you can start using some correct grammar structures automatically, because you've heard them a lot. Finally, the last criterion is pronunciation. You should be able to use a full range of pronunciation features with precision and subtlety, sustain flexible use of features throughout, and be effortless to understand. The best way to achieve all this is to use the shadowing technique. You can use the Deep English website, where you can listen and repeat, imitating the speaker's intonation, pronunciation, and pitch. Are you planning to take the IELTS speaking test soon? Then listen carefully to this answer and tell me what you think. What is your favorite hobby, and why do you enjoy it? My favorite hobby is reading. I enjoy it because it helps me relax and escape from reality. I read books on different topics: fiction, history, and science. I usually read for about an hour every night. Will this answer score well on the IELTS speaking section? Not really. Why not? It doesn't sound natural. That's how I hear many of my students speak in our speaking evaluation sessions. What many of them forget is that the key to scoring high on the IELTS speaking test is to sound natural. The way you normally sound when conversing in your native language. Would you answer that way if I asked you the same question in your native language? I don't think so. Then what is missing? Well, actually, there are a few things missing in that answer. But the one we're going to address today is the lack of linking words. What are linking words? They are little words or phrases that act like bridges in sentences or paragraphs. They help connect ideas smoothly and make your writing or speaking easier to understand. Adding them would have made our response a bit less robotic and more fluent. Effective use of linking words also improves the coherence and fluidity of the answer, making it sound more natural and engaging. So, as you've probably guessed, in this video we're going to talk about the 16 most effective linking words to use in IELTS speaking. Again, remember that simply adding linking words to your answers isn't enough to get a high score. There are a number of other important factors to consider. If you're about to take the test and want to find out what you're doing wrong and how you can score higher, enroll in our IELTS prep course and get your speaking and writing skills evaluated. The promo code link is below. Also, we've created a free PDF file with academic vocabulary to help you improve your score in every section of the IELTS test. You can find the link to the PDF in the description below. Now, your mini assignment will be to watch the lesson carefully, write down the linking words you find most useful, and then answer the same question again using those words. You can share your responses in the comments below. Let's get started. There are 3 typical mistakes IELTS students usually make with linking words. The first mistake is to avoid connecting words altogether. You'd be surprised, but in my one-on-one sessions, I often see advanced students who are so stressed about their IELTS speaking test that they forget even the most basic linking words, like also, but, and so. 2. Using formal linking words. If you go online and search for linking word lists, you will see both formal and informal linking words mixed together. This is why many students use words like moreover, nevertheless, and therefore in their answers, because they think it will increase their score. Well, it won't. Save these formal alternatives for the writing section. Trust me, you'll need them there. Instead, focus on the linking words used in spoken English. Mistake number 3, using linking words incorrectly. Some students try using as many connecting words as possible. Others simply use them incorrectly. Either way, the result is often that your answers sound forced and unnatural. And remember, sounding natural is the main thing to focus on. So, to make sure you get the most of today's video, don't write down and memorize every single linking word. Instead, focus on the ones you like and think you're likely to use on the day of the test. Then, come up with sample sentences of how you might use them in your speech. And practice, practice, and practice until these connectors become automatic and you no longer think about them when you speak. Also, avoid learning linking words that are too formal or that people rarely use. That's why in this lesson, I've tried to choose the most common linkers that I hear native speakers use all the time. Finally, let's get to the linking words themselves. The first 4 linking words that you definitely know are also, but, so, and. Though they're very basic and you probably know them well, they are usually the ones that native speakers use all the time. Let me give you some examples of how to use them in the IELTS speaking. Question: do you enjoy cooking? Yes, absolutely. It allows me to be creative and experiment with different flavors. I also find it relaxing after a long day at work. Question: what kind of music do you like? I like various genres of music. Classical music is my favorite, but I also enjoy listening to jazz and pop occasionally, so it really depends on my mood. Question: do you prefer to study alone or in a group? I prefer to study alone. It allows me to focus better and work at my own pace. But I also find group study sessions helpful for discussing complex topics and clarifying doubts. Question: how often do you exercise? I try to exercise regularly. I go for a run 3 times a week and swim almost every day. Also, I do yoga at home on the weekends. So I aim to maintain a healthy balance between cardio and flexibility exercises. Let's move on. Number 5, besides. You have to be careful with this one. People often confuse it with and, in addition, or moreover. However, the connotation is slightly different. We use besides when we add an idea as an afterthought. For example, you're talking about a topic and a new idea comes to you while you're speaking. I don't really want to see that movie. I'm quite busy with my coursework at the moment. Besides, I checked the reviews and they're not that great. Number 6, to be honest. Another very popular linking expression. We use it in informal conversation to add authenticity or emphasize the speaker's sincerity. To be honest, I didn't really enjoy the concert. A similar expression is to tell the truth. To tell the truth, I'm not sure if I can finish this project on time. The next 2 words on our list are overall and basically. We often use overall to give a summary or a general assessment. Overall, I think the conference was a success. Now, basically simplifies or summarizes a complex idea. Basically, it means that you have to study harder to pass the exam. The next set of linking words are also very helpful because they help you build complex sentences. One such example is unless. Unless introduces a contrasting idea or a condition. I usually don't call people unless it's urgent. They won't understand unless they experience it themselves. Unless you really need to reach me, don't call me. Another example is while. It usually contrasts 2 ideas or actions. While I'm quite busy with my project at the moment, I can find time to help you. 12. Though. It introduces a contrast or a concession. Though it was raining, we still went for a walk. I loved the movie's plot, though I didn't really like the actors. 13. Instead or instead of. Note that instead of is usually followed by a noun or a gerund, so you will never see an infinitive verb after it. Instead of going to the gym, I went to the movies with my friend. I didn't want to go back. Instead, I walked around the park until it got dark. The next 2 linking words to consider are actually and in fact. In IELTS speaking, using actually and in fact can help you clarify your ideas and provide additional details to support your arguments or examples. Actually is usually used to correct a misunderstanding or to provide a surprising or unexpected piece of information. It can also be used to introduce a contrasting idea. I thought the restaurant would be crowded, but it was actually quite empty. Actually, I have a different perspective on this matter. In fact, is used to introduce information that supports or confirms the previous statement. It is often used to provide evidence or support for an argument. In fact, there is a lot more to the story than meets the eye. Finally, we often use connecting words to add emphasis. For example, especially. We use especially when something stands out. It emphasizes a specific detail or aspect. I love sports, especially tennis. I need to score high on the IELTS speaking section in a few days, and I have no idea where to begin. There are so many tips and tricks out there that I feel overwhelmed. Questions like, what's your favorite perfume? Can you describe a major festival in your country? Puzzle me. I don't know if I should use fancy words like a plethora of, plummet, ubiquitous, and skyrocket. Or keep my answers simple. These are just a few of the typical problems IELTS students have when it comes to the IELTS speaking. Having taught IELTS for over 10 years, I've seen many different types of students, and all of them have struggled with this section of the test. Of course, they all had different problems, but most struggled with speaking fluently, coming up with ideas fast, expanding on their ideas, and staying calm when asked a difficult question. However, the majority of these problems will go away once you know what you're expected to do to get a high score. So, I decided to dedicate this video to all future IELTS test takers who want to score high on the speaking section of the IELTS. By the end of this video, I hope you will understand that the IELTS speaking is not as scary as it seems, and you will feel equipped with all the necessary tools and knowledge to tackle it effectively. Quick note before we begin, it's important to realize that your IELTS speaking score, just like the score you get for any other section of the language test, depends largely on your level. If you're an intermediate student, your preparation plan will be very different from that of an advanced English learner. You'll need to work on your conversation skills first and expand your vocabulary. A quick and effective way to do that is to watch videos, podcasts, or anything in English, and make daily oral summaries of what you've learned using 5 new words. You can also use the shadowing technique by listening to the speaker and repeating what they say as closely and quickly as possible. This technique is particularly effective for improving pronunciation, intonation, and overall speaking fluency. One of my students from my one-on-one sessions recently got an 8 on the speaking section after doing this every day for about a month, even though her level at the beginning of our lessons wasn't super high. If you want to know how to consistently get high scores on the IELTS speaking and writing, check out our IELTS prep book. It's one of my favorite products right now because it not only provides you with all the necessary information to excel in the IELTS speaking, but also presents it in a simple and fun way. For example, let's look at the speaking module. It starts with a quick overview of the section and its format, all organized in tables, so you don't need to search the internet for this information. Next, we provide examples of the questions, followed by the scoring criteria. We've presented it in a straightforward and engaging manner, allowing you to rate your performance yourself. We then delve into each assessment criterion, offering not just tips, but a practical guide with sample answers, grammar revision, important pronunciation aspects, and more. There are also exercises to improve fluency, pronunciation, and speaking speed, all with links where you can practice immediately, tips to avoid repetition, fun resources to learn new words, useful prefixes, suffixes, and roots, common speaking topics with sample notes, and more. I'm personally very proud of this product, as it's the only guide you need, along with the Cambridge preparation books, to prepare for the IELTS test quickly and effectively, and get a high score on test day. The link to it is below, so feel free to check it out. Now, in today's video, we're going to tackle the IELTS speaking questions together. We'll walk through a simulation of the IELTS speaking section, step by step, so you can see exactly what's expected and how to deliver your answers effectively. Let's get started. Part 1. In this part, the examiner introduces themselves and asks you to introduce yourself. You'll be asked general questions about familiar topics, such as your home, family, work, studies, and interests. This section assesses your ability to communicate basic information and engage in casual conversation. I've tried to make the sample answers as universal as possible, so that many of you can relate to them and use them as a study guide. What do you usually do when you finish work, school each day? After work, I usually like to unwind by engaging in a few different activities. Typically, I'll start with some light exercise, such as a jog or a yoga session, which helps me clear my mind and release any built-up stress. After that, I enjoy cooking dinner, experimenting with new recipes, or sticking to my favorites. Evenings are usually reserved for spending quality time with my family or catching up on a good book. Do you ever cycle to work or college? Yes, I do cycle to work occasionally. I think it's a great way to get some exercise into my daily routine. Riding my bike in the morning is refreshing and gives me a nice energy boost for the day. Do you prefer to travel to work in your own car or by public transport, and why? I usually prefer taking public transport to work. For one, it's better for the environment because it cuts down on the number of cars on the road and lowers emissions. Plus, I can use the travel time to catch up on reading, listen to podcasts, or just relax before starting a busy day. It also saves me the hassle of dealing with traffic jams and finding parking. However, on days when I have early meetings or need to carry a lot of materials, driving my own car can be more convenient. How much sleep do you need every night? Ideally, I need about 7 to 8 hours of sleep each night to feel fully rested and functional the next day. If I get fewer than 7 hours, I often feel sluggish and less focused, which can affect my performance at work and my overall well-being. Do you ever wake up in the middle of the night? Why? Quite often, I'd say. Sometimes it may be because of external factors, such as noise or a sudden change in temperature. Other times it could be stress or anxiety about something happening in my life that doesn't let me sleep. What do you do to help you fall asleep at night? Why? I have a consistent bedtime routine. I dim the lights and turn off electronics about an hour before bed to signal my body that it's time to rest. I like to read a book or listen to calming music to relax. Sometimes I do meditation or deep breathing exercises to reduce stress. Keeping my room cool and sticking to a regular sleep schedule also helps me sleep better. That's the end of part 1. Part 2. In this part, you'll be given a task card with a topic and points to cover in your talk. You'll have 1 minute to prepare and make notes if you wish. Then you'll speak for 1 or 2 minutes on the topic without interruption. After you talk, the examiner may ask 1 or 2 follow-up questions related to the topic. This part tests your ability to speak at length on a given topic coherently and fluently. Describe a film or movie that you enjoyed. You should say when and where you saw it, what kind of film or movie it was, what happened, and explain why you liked the film or movie. One film that I thoroughly enjoyed was Inception. It's a thought-provoking sci-fi thriller directed by Christopher Nolan. I watched it at home with my friends last year during a movie night. Inception is a complex and intriguing movie that explores the concept of dream manipulation. It follows Dom Cobb, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, who is a skilled thief that extracts valuable secrets from people's subconscious while they're dreaming. The main plot revolves around Cobb being offered a chance to clear his criminal record if he can successfully perform inception, which means planting an idea in someone's mind without them knowing. As the story unfolds, Cobb and his team navigate multiple layers of dreams, each more intricate than the last. The movie is packed with stunning visual effects, especially in scenes where the characters manipulate their dream environments, such as bending buildings and defying gravity. The tension builds as they face numerous obstacles and threats within the dream world, while trying to keep a grip on reality. The reason I enjoyed Inception so much was because of its incredibly original and intellectually stimulating storyline. It kept me engaged and sparked discussions with my friends long after the movie was over. The film's exploration of dreams and reality, along with its philosophical themes about the power of ideas, made it a profound and memorable experience. Also, the performances by the cast, especially DiCaprio, were outstanding, and Nolan's direction added depth and intensity to the story. So all that made it an unforgettable film that I really enjoyed. Finally, part 3. Part 3 involves a discussion with the examiner about more abstract and complex ideas related to the topic you spoke about in part 2. The examiner will ask questions that encourage you to analyze, discuss, and express your opinions on broader issues. This section evaluates your ability to discuss ideas in depth and justify your opinions. What kinds of films are popular with younger people in your country? How about older people? In my country, younger people tend to gravitate toward action movies and superhero franchises. For example, Marvel movies like Avengers and Spider-Man are big hits among teens and young adults. They love the thrilling special effects, epic battles, and relatable characters. They also love animated movies from studios like Pixar and Disney for their engaging stories and stunning animation. Older people often prefer dramas, historical films, and classic movies. They appreciate movies that offer deep storytelling and strong character development. For example, movies like The King's Speech and Beautiful Mind are better received by older audiences for their historical context and emotional depth. Documentaries and biopics are also favorites because they offer insightful perspectives on real-life events and figures. Is the acting in a film more important than the story? Why? Why not? I think both the acting and the story are crucial to the success of a movie, but if I had to choose, I'd say the story is more important. A compelling story is the backbone of a good movie. It's what keeps the audience engaged and invested in the characters' journeys. Even with stellar acting, a weak or poorly structured story can leave viewers unsatisfied. However, that shouldn't undermine the importance of good acting. Skilled actors bring characters to life, making the audience believe in their struggles, joys, and transformations. For example, I recently saw The Revenant with Leonardo DiCaprio, and I have to say that his intense and immersive performance was key to conveying the raw and visceral nature of the story. I was quite impressed. Yet, without a compelling story to support it, even the best acting can fall flat. Do you think the cinema has increased or decreased in popularity in recent years? In recent years, the popularity of traditional movie theaters has declined somewhat, largely due to the rise of streaming services. Platforms such as Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Disney Plus offer a wide variety of movies and shows that people can watch from the comfort of their own homes. The convenience and affordability of these services have made them a popular choice, especially among younger audiences. But that doesn't mean that movie theaters are becoming obsolete. Blockbuster releases and films with spectacular visual effects, such as Avatar, still draw large crowds to theaters. The experience of watching a movie on the big screen with high-quality sound and picture is something that streaming at home can't quite replicate. Besides, special events and film festivals continue to attract cinephiles who appreciate the communal aspect of watching movies in theater. So while there has been a shift toward home viewing, movie theaters still hold a special place for many people, especially for big releases and social outings. Welcome to this comprehensive guide on how to ace IELTS writing. Today we're going to discover what the writing section of the IELTS test looks like, what the typical mistakes are, and discuss 7 important things to keep in mind for success in this section. Without further ado, let's get started. Part 1. The structure. The IELTS writing section consists of 2 tasks, Task 1 and Task 2. On the IELTS Academic, Task 1 involves writing a report describing some kind of visual information, such as tables, pie charts, bar charts, line graphs, maps, diagrams, and so on. This task is designed to test your ability to present information clearly and accurately in writing. Task 1 for IELTS general training is slightly different. You have to write a letter based on the prompt you're given. It could be a letter of complaint. For example, you didn't like the service or product you received. A letter of request. You want to make a reservation or ask for advice. A letter of recommendation. To recommend something. A letter of invitation, and so on. This task measures your ability to communicate about common practical situations. So, while the IELTS Academic tests your ability to analyze and summarize information effectively, the IELTS General Training focuses on how well you can communicate in writing in everyday situations. You have 20 minutes to complete Task 1 for both the IELTS Academic and IELTS General Training. You should write a minimum of 150 words. Task 2 is the same for both tests. You have to write an essay in which you answer a question or a statement. The only difference is that the questions for general training essays are usually easier to understand and cover common topics, while academic essays are more complex and cover a wider range of topics. However, the types of essays are exactly the same. There are several types of essays. An opinion essay. It will usually ask you to agree or disagree with the statement. A discussion essay that asks you to discuss both sides and give your opinion. A 2-part essay. This essay usually asks 2 questions about some topic. An advantages and disadvantages essay. This one has 2 versions that will require a different approach. A cause and solution essay, and so on. It's important to know how to organize your answer for each type of essay. Because if you use the same approach for all of them, you'll never get a high score. We cover all of these essay types in our IELTS preparation course. So if your exam is approaching and you feel you need further guidance, feel free to join by clicking the link below. As a former IELTS test taker, I know how frustrated and disoriented you may feel right now because there is so much information out there and you don't know where to start. That is why we have organized all the information in the writing module in a clear and easy to understand way. We'll practice writing the ideal introduction, learn how to brainstorm effectively, find out how to approach each essay type, and what to do to get a high score on test day. We'll also provide you with templates that will make writing an essay much easier. If you already have experience with the writing section, choose the Pro package and get your speaking and writing assessed. Now, Task 2 is longer than Task 1 and requires you to write at least 250 words. You have 40 minutes to complete it. Let's move on to Step 2. The typical mistakes students make when preparing for the IELTS writing section. The first mistake is to write less than the task requires. If you write less than 150 words for writing Task 1 and less than 250 words for writing Task 2, you won't be able to develop your ideas well enough and will lose points. In fact, in the past, this would automatically give you a 5 for task achievement. But this rule is no longer applicable. However, to get a high score, I'd recommend writing about 175 to 185 words for writing Task 1 and 275 to 285 words for writing Task 2. Another mistake is to write too much. Some students think that the more ideas they include in their essays, the higher their score will be. In fact, you won't get a high score just by writing a longer essay. Although there is no upper limit on IELTS writing, what I often see is that exceeding the word limit of 300 words for writing Task 2 and 200 words for writing Task 1 often results in 1. Students making more mistakes because they can't proofread their essays carefully enough. 2. Adding too many relevant sentences that don't contribute to your essay. Remember that effective writing is all about getting your message across in a concise and clear way. So don't add too many sentences just to impress an examiner. Aim for 175 to 185 words for writing Task 1 and 275 to 285 words for writing Task 2. 3. Memorizing sample essays. You may not believe it, but there are many students who simply memorize model answers and use them on the day of the test. Well, this will most likely result in a low score. Examiners aren't stupid, no matter how many essays you memorize. If you use a memorized model answer on the day of the test, the examiner will see that it doesn't match the topic and will lower your score. Mistake number 4, not analyzing the question before you start writing. This applies to both Task 1 and Task 2. When you write them, make sure you spend at least 5 minutes analyzing the prompt and thinking about what to include in your answer. This will help you write faster later, address all the points in the prompt, and ensure that you don't go off topic. Mistake number 5, copying the text from the prompt. This is a very common mistake. Again, there is nothing wrong with copying a few words from the question in both tasks. In fact, I encourage my students to do this if they can't think of an appropriate synonym or paraphrase for a word, or if they can't rephrase the question so that it doesn't contain that word. Taking a few words from the question is better than paraphrasing incorrectly. However, if you copy the whole sentence or even part of the sentence without changing anything, you will lose points because the examiner won't count them in the word count. If you have trouble putting the same information in your own words, use these techniques when paraphrasing. 1. Change infinitives like to drive to gerunds, driving, or vice versa, if you can't think of an appropriate synonym. 2. Change part of speech, nouns to verbs or verbs to nouns. For example, to influence and influence, to have a negative effect, to adversely affect, This is a very helpful collocation for your writing, so feel free to write it down. You can always say that something adversely affects something else. 3. Change passive voice to active voice and active voice to passive voice. For example, some people believe, it's often believed that. There are other techniques you can use, but these are the 3 most common. Mistake number 6, making too many spelling mistakes. No matter how good your essay is, if it has too many spelling mistakes or typos, you won't score high. You can improve your spelling by reading more or practicing on the Fast Fingers website. I'll leave the link below. You can use American or British spelling during the test, but make sure you are consistent. Mistake number 7, writing sentences that are too long. Yes, we all know that in order to get a high score for grammatical range and accuracy, you should demonstrate a wide range of structures. This includes using complex, compound, and complex compound sentences. But what I often see is that many students make their sentences too long. This may be typical in their native language, but in English, writing extremely long sentences often leads to a loss of coherence and more grammatical mistakes. Of course, you should carefully review all 4 types of sentences and practice using them in your writing automatically with full flexibility and control. But on the day of the test, focus on organizing your ideas in a clear and effective way, rather than worrying about whether or not your sentences are long enough. Finally, mistake number 8 is not giving yourself enough time to proofread your answer. One of the primary goals of writing a successful essay for both Task 1 and Task 2 is to produce a lot of error-free sentences. In fact, the fewer mistakes you have in your essay, the better. Unlike the TOEFL test, IELTS examiners are very strict about all kinds of mistakes, including grammar, vocabulary, and spelling. So take at least 5 minutes at the end of your essay to carefully review what you've written. Read your essay 3 times. For content, make sure you've covered all the points and that your essay is logical and easy to follow. For grammar, looking for errors in grammar and punctuation. And for vocabulary, making sure that the vocabulary you use is appropriate and effectively conveys your message. Now that we've discussed the most common mistakes students make in IELTS writing, it's time to move on to the most important part of our lesson. 7 things to keep in mind to succeed in this section. Actually, we already covered many important tips when we went through the mistakes, but let's look at a few more things to keep in mind. 1. Make sure your writing skills are up to par. It goes without saying that no matter how many tips and tricks you study, if your writing skills are poor, you won't be able to ace the IELTS writing. We have a few lectures at the beginning of our course where I explain how to effectively improve your English, including your writing skills. But the main advice is to read a lot. In fact, the more you expose yourself to quality English, the better your level becomes. Brush up on your grammar, expand your advanced and academic vocabulary, study synonyms, and practice, practice, practice. I can't tell you how important daily writing is. If you only study grammar or vocabulary, but don't write, it will be a challenge to improve your writing skills. Set aside at least 10 to 15 minutes a day for writing. Tip number 2 flows from tip number 1. Study the most important grammar rules. I'd recommend starting with topics such as articles, tenses, punctuation, sentence types, plural and singular forms, conditionals, and prepositions. Believe me, as someone who proofreads and grades essays on a daily basis, I see that every single student makes mistakes on most of these topics. You can use the English Page website to revise many of them. I love this website because it offers effective exercises for advanced students to practice grammar rules. Tip number 3, study synonyms and paraphrasing. As we just discussed, you'll need to efficiently paraphrase the questions for Task 1 and Task 2. To do this, you need to be good at paraphrasing. To practice, simply take a paragraph from any article and try to rewrite it in your own words. You can also use the Excelsior Online Writing Lab for fun paraphrasing exercises. Here are some important paraphrasing techniques. Start the sentence at a different point than the original. Use synonyms. Change the sentence structure. Try switching from the active voice to the passive voice and vice versa. Break up longer sentences or combine shorter ones. Speaking of synonyms, when writing an essay, you should not only know synonyms for the word you want to change, but also be able to use them well. For example, some synonyms of very important are crucial, essential, pivotal, vital, key, indispensable, integral, and so on. Does this mean that I can just use all of these words in the same context? Not really. The same goes for any new words you learn. You may know the word and its definition, but that doesn't mean you'll be able to use it successfully on test day. In fact, I often see students who misuse some new words they have learned. So tip number 4 is to learn chunks of language, not individual words. We often call these chunks collocations. A collocation is a word or phrase that is often used with another word or phrase in a way that sounds correct and natural. And you want your essays to be correct and natural. Some examples of collocations are adversely affect, tackle the issue of, dive into the topic of, and so on. To make sure you really know how to use a new word, create what I call a collocation flower. This is where you put the word in question in the center of the flower and think about what other words it collocates with. For example, let's say my new word is foster. One of its meanings is to encourage the development or growth of something. Now, what can I foster? You can foster innovation, creativity, cooperation between countries, unity, and so on. To find such collocations, use vocabulary.com or the Scale website. Tip number 5, don't overcomplicate your essays unless you're 100% sure of the vocabulary you use. I'm not saying you shouldn't use complex words and/or phrases. In fact, you're highly encouraged to do so to get a high score on the lexical resource. You should be able to demonstrate a wide range of vocabulary, but you should use it accurately and appropriately, with very natural and sophisticated control of lexical features. What I see many students do is try to stuff their answers with as many fancy and challenging words as they know. They usually think that the harder their essays are to understand, the better. In fact, using sophisticated vocabulary incorrectly will only cost you points. So make sure you only use the words you're 100% sure of and focus more on the content than the vocabulary. Tip number 6, in writing task 2, make your position as clear as possible. For example, if the question asks you to agree or disagree with the statement, either agree or disagree, and don't choose partial agreement. This will help you meet the requirements of the assignment. Tip number 7, always include an opening statement and a sign-off in your letters for task 1 of the IELTS general training. An opening statement usually explains the reason why you're writing this letter. For example, I'm writing with regards to. I'm writing to thank you for the wonderful party you organized for Mark's birthday. Make sure your opening statement matches the type of letter. It's formal or informal and matches its purpose. If it's a complaint letter, an apology letter, a request letter, and so on. Your sign-off should also be adapted. If you're writing to your friend, you're not going to end with yours sincerely. You need something less formal, like best wishes. We'll discover what to expect on test day and how to make the most of it. The first thing to keep in mind is that no matter how well you prepare, things can go wrong on test day, and you need to be ready for that. In fact, there are 3 types of students when it comes to test taking. Those who overperform on test day, those who perform as expected, and those who underperform. I know students who may be at a mediocre level, but end up scoring even higher than they thought possible, because they stay calm and focused and do their best on test day. I also know students who do amazingly well when they practice at home, but get so nervous during the test that they underperform. There are also those who do exactly the same as in their assessments. That's why, when I evaluate students speaking and writing during consultations for our IELTS prep course and in my one-on-one sessions, I always encourage them to take the test only after they have consistently scored a few points above the required score. That way, even if something goes wrong, they'll still get their target score and stay on the safe side. In most cases, they score higher than they need to and are very happy with their results. To make sure you get to this level, we've created the IELTS preparation book. It's a compilation of practice tips and tricks, useful resources, and tons of exercises to really boost your level. When you get tips like, work on your paraphrasing skills, you have to search for resources to do that. In our prep book, you'll have all the practice exercises necessary to improve your skills for each section of the test. All chapters are followed by fun quizzes to test your understanding, so that you remember all the important material covered. We've also included a chapter where you can review the vocabulary and grammar that every student must know in order to score well on the IELTS writing and speaking sections. After reviewing hundreds of essays and listening to thousands of speaking responses, I can assure you that every single student makes pretty much the same mistakes, and these mistakes don't allow them to score higher. That's why I've included all the necessary information in the grammar and vocabulary section. A common misconception is that you need to know all the grammar rules to get a high score on the IELTS. This is not true. In fact, brushing up on just a few topics will help you improve your score significantly. I'll leave the link to the book in the description below. As you can see, effective preparation for the test day is key, but another important thing is the test day itself. During my consultations, students often ask me questions such as, how can I manage my anxiety during the test? Can I take notes in the listening section if I'm taking a computer-based test? Can I ask the examiner to repeat the question on the speaking section? Can I start the writing section with writing task 2? And many more. The thing is, if your test is tomorrow, and you have no idea how to answer these questions, you'll probably end up scoring much lower than you would have. Because first, you don't know the rules of the game. And second, because it'll put extra pressure on you and make you worry even more. So tip number 2 is to study carefully what to expect on the day of the test. You don't want to worry about getting to the test center on time or having any technical problems if you decide to take the IELTS online. So let's take the guesswork out of it and walk you through the process of taking the test both online and at the test center. There are 2 types of IELTS tests, IELTS Academic and IELTS General Training. The IELTS Academic is created for future students, while the IELTS General Training is usually oriented on those who want to move to an English-speaking country. You can take both tests at the test center in a paper-based format or on a computer. The question types, timing for each part of the test, and content are the same for both computer and paper-based tests. If you choose to take a computer-based version of the test, you'll do the reading, listening, and writing sections on a computer, and you'll need to type your answers. You'll also have the option of taking notes on paper during the listening test. If you take the IELTS paper-based test, you'll complete the reading, listening, and writing sections on paper. You can use a pen or HB pencil to complete your writing test. But you must use an HB pencil to write your listening and reading answers on the answer sheet. The speaking section takes place separately on both tests and is a face-to-face interview with an IELTS examiner. For the IELTS Academic, there is also an option to take the test online. It's called IELTS Online and allows you to take the test at home or in a private location with a stable internet connection. It has the same test format and duration as the IELTS Academic test taken in a test center. But this time, the speaking test is done online via a video call with an IELTS examiner. Before taking the IELTS Online test, you should check whether the university of your choice accepts IELTS Online scores. Let's start by talking about taking the test at the test center. First, you will want to arrive a little earlier than the test center tells you. They'll send you an email before the test to inform you of the schedule for test day. The email will tell you what time the test starts and when they'll expect you at the test center to register. Arrive about 30 minutes early. That way, you won't be in a rush and you'll have plenty of time to do everything. Eat and drink beforehand. You won't be able to bring food into the test room. You can only bring water in a clear bottle. When going into the test room, you'll need to bring your ID card, a pencil and pen, and an eraser. You must leave other personal belongings outside the test room. I remember when I took the test, we just left all our stuff in one room and went into the test room with only our IDs, pens, and pencils. One important thing to remember is that you should bring the same ID that you used when you booked the test. It should also be valid. Otherwise, you won't be able to take the test. They'll also take a photo of you, which will appear on your IELTS certificate. So make sure you dress nicely. First, you'll take the listening, reading, and writing sections with no breaks between them. Your speaking test can be taken on the same day or up to 7 days before or after. My speaking test was on the same day as the other sections, and I was very happy about that because I didn't want to go to the test center again. If you have any questions during the test, you can always raise your hand to ask for help. For example, suppose you can't hear the recording very well in the listening section. Raise your hand. If you need to use the bathroom, raise your hand. Now, you can take the IELTS online from home or any other quiet and private place where no one will disturb you. It's designed for future students, so if you're taking the IELTS for visa or immigration purposes, you'll need to take it at a test center. As I said, your room should be quiet and no one should enter it during the test. It should also have plenty of light so the examiner can see your face well and make sure it's you and not someone else. You may sit or stand at a table, and you should remove all personal items from the table except your passport, a water glass, or unlabeled water bottle, and your phone. Keep your phone with you as you will need it to show your keyboard and screen to the proctor who will be observing you. Once you've done this, you should turn off your phone and put it away. Make sure you don't have any headphones, earbuds, watches, or other non-essential items on or with you during the test. You'll also need a stable internet connection, so it's best to avoid taking the test from unfamiliar locations. Before you take the test, I recommend that you watch the British Council's online IELTS tutorial, where you'll see what the different types of questions will look like during the test, and how to use some of the key features of the Inspire exam portal. This will help you feel more confident and know how to navigate the portal effectively on test day. As mentioned earlier, with IELTS Online, you'll take the listening, reading, and writing tests on a computer, just as with the computer-based test. However, your speaking test will still be with a human examiner and will take place via an online video call. The test is taken on the Inspire exam portal, IEP. You'll get an email with a download link after you book your test. IELTS.org recommends that you do this at least 1 day before your test, so that you can do a pre-test system check. It's better to do this 2 to 3 days in advance to avoid extra anxiety. Your listening, reading, and writing tests will be monitored by a remote proctor. This is a person who will make sure you don't cheat. Actually, you won't be able to do much because once the test starts, your browser will be locked and you won't be able to access anything but the test platform. But don't worry, once you've finished the test, you can remove the IELTS exam portal. You'll receive your results 6 to 8 days after taking IELTS Online. You can cancel your IELTS Online test up to 72 hours before your test date. Finally, tip number 3 is to avoid anxiety and panic at all costs. Anxiety goes hand in hand with distraction and takes away your focus and concentration. So try to stay as calm as possible. The main problem with anxiety is that when you worry, your brain freezes up, so your memory, concentration, and focus plummet. You know that feeling when your mind is completely blank and you can remember even the most basic things? In times of extreme stress, the feeling of blanking out is common. We all have limited reserves of cognitive focus, and when too much is going on behind the scenes, our minds do not function as they normally would. Now, imagine this happening during the test. The listening section begins, and you can barely concentrate on what the speaker is saying, let alone answer the questions. Or you get so nervous during the speaking section that you start stuttering or babbling, which will definitely lower your score. This is not what you want to happen on test day. There are a few things you can do to eliminate anxiety and reduce stress. First, try to understand why you're so anxious. One reason is that you're not used to working under pressure. At home, you take practice tests in a familiar atmosphere with no one to interrupt you. So when you get to the test center, you may be overwhelmed by the number of other test takers and simply get lost. To avoid this, you should simulate the test conditions as much as possible and even prepare for the worst case scenario. What can you do? First, start taking full-length practice tests that simulate your test day a week before the test. Complete the listening, reading, and writing sections all at once. Then take a small break and continue with the speaking section. If you plan to take the test online, you'll be monitored by a proctor. You won't see them, but they will be watching you to make sure you're not cheating. To prepare for this, turn on your computer's webcam to make it feel like you're being watched. Second, practice under tougher conditions than the ones you'll have in the test. Turn on the radio or a podcast in the background when you take practice tests, or simply study in a room full of your family or friends. This will help you learn to ignore distractions and focus on your tasks. For the speaking section, ask a friend or family member to play the role of the examiner. Ask them to be serious and not smile when they interview you. I often see students who worry that the examiner isn't friendly to them and think it's because they are saying something wrong. That's not true. In fact, on my test day, the examiner was very unfriendly, but it had nothing to do with me. And despite his attitude, I ended up getting a great score. So don't be affected by the way the examiner communicates with you. Maybe they're just tired or have had a bad day. Also, ask a friend or family member to take notes while you speak. Again, very often students panic when the examiner writes something down because they think the only thing he or she would write down is their mistakes. This isn't true. Most examiners will not take notes while you speak, unless they're writing down the time to help them manage the schedule. Don't let this ruin your performance. It's not your job to worry about it. Concentrate on delivering what the examiner wants so that you get a high score. If you get used to someone taking notes while you speak, when you practice at home, you won't even notice if an examiner occasionally writes down a few things on test day. Another way to eliminate stress is to tell yourself that this is not your last try. You can retake the test as many times as you want. Imagine it's just one of the practice tests you've been doing at home. You certainly want to try to do your best, but just try. In my experience, all students who think it's their last attempt score lower than expected. Instead, those who just want to test themselves and are willing to take the test a few more times end up passing with flying colors. Also, practice breathing techniques. There are many breathing techniques that can help you calm your mind and reduce stress. One is called box breathing. You inhale through your nose for 4 counts, then hold your breath for 4 counts, exhale through your mouth for 4 counts, and then pause for 4 more counts. Repeat this circle over and over until you feel calmer. My suggestion is to do everything for 5 counts instead of 4, because it's a little more effective. You can also do an eye exercise that usually helps stop panic attacks. It's a great distraction from your worries and may even make you laugh at how silly you'll look. First, move your eyes up and down at least 15 times. Count carefully, this will distract you even more. Then, move your eyes from side to side another 15 times. Side to side, side to side. See how funny I already look? Then, move your eyes diagonally, like this. And then, like this. Again, 15 times each. By the time you're done, you'll be so absorbed in the process that you'll forget why you were anxious in the first place. If you want to learn more strategies and techniques to help you ace the IELTS, check out our IELTS book. There is a whole chapter dedicated to test day tips and strategies, with checklists, detailed explanations, and advice on what to do on test day. Now that you know what to expect on the IELTS test day, it's time for some final tips. 1. Don't study the day before the test. Cramming at the last minute won't help. Instead, take a day to relax, watch a movie in English, and forget about the test. I often have students ask me to have a lesson with them on the day of the test. And I usually say no, because that won't help. Everything you need to know should be studied beforehand. 2. Go to bed early and get a good night's sleep. This will leave you fresh and energetic in the morning. According to research, sleeping about 7 to 8 hours is associated with the highest cognitive performance and greater gray matter volume in several areas of the brain. It also varies greatly from person to person. In fact, I would allow for at least 9 to 10 hours of quality sleep before the test. 3. Do some breathing exercises on the way to the test center or an hour before the online test. This will help you cope with the pressure. 4. Do a few things before the speaking section. First, repeat the breathing exercises. This will help you stay calm. Second, do at least 10 tongue twisters to warm up your voice and ensure clear enunciation. Enunciation is how clearly and distinctly you speak. Clear enunciation is very important in IELTS speaking. Also, don't rush when answering questions in the speaking section. Slowing down a bit will improve your pronunciation and enunciation and allow you to avoid mistakes. Watch a quality English speaking video or podcast for about 5 minutes. This will help you get into your best speaking mode because you will be unconsciously imitating the speaker you just heard a few minutes ago. We did it! Congratulations! Now you have everything you need to score high on the IELTS. Thanks for watching! Let me know in the comments if you found this lesson helpful and if you'd like to see more videos like this in the near future. If you want to master all 4 sections of the IELTS exam and get a great score on test day, click on the link below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to get more tips and tricks on how to ace the IELTS test. As always, remember that getting a high score on the IELTS is not an impossible feat. You can do it. Until next time, have fun studying, and I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!